Back up, all of you, right now. Nobody moved. Four of them, one of him, and a bleeding old man who couldn't stand on his own anymore. Logan Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Something in the way he stepped forward, steady, certain like a man who had already made his decision 3 steps back, made every one of those 4 attackers hesitate for the first time all night. 6 seconds later, it was over. And the world would spend the next 3 years trying to understand how one quiet mechanic from Phoenix changed everything. If you're new here, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now let's get into it. The shift had run 11 hours and 14 minutes, and Logan Carter knew the exact count because he checked his phone at 6:47 p.m. when his supervisor, a heavy-set man named Darnell, who perpetually smelled of motor oil and black coffee, had finally waved him out the door with nothing more than a 2-finger salute and the words, "Same time tomorrow, kid." Logan had nodded. He always nodded. He pulled his jacket from the hook beside the bay doors, folded it over his forearm, the way his mother had taught him to keep it clean, and walked out into the early evening air of an industrial district that most people in Phoenix drove through without ever actually looking at. He was 24 years old. He stood an inch or two over 6 feet lean in the way that people who never quite eat enough and work too hard get lean with blonde hair, that he kept short because it was practical, not because he cared about appearances. His hands were the hands of a man 10 years older, scarred at the knuckles, calloused in the exact places that told you he'd been doing real work since before he was legally allowed to sign for it himself. He wore the same thing he wore every day: dark work pants, a gray thermal undershirt, steel-toed boots that had been resold twice because he refused to replace something that still had life in it. He was not by any measure a man anyone would have cast as a hero. He was the man you passed on the sidewalk and forgot about before you'd taken 3 more steps. That was exactly the point. Logan walked the same route home every night, 14 blocks through a neighborhood that held its breath between the end of the industrial shift and the beginning of whatever the evening brought. Auto shops with their shutters half down, a laundromat with 2 machines perpetually out of service, a Mexican place on the corner of 5th that he ate at twice a week because the food was good, and the owner, a woman named Rosa, who was maybe 60 and moved like she was 40, never charged him for the extra tortillas she always added to his order. He had his headphones in, but he wasn't listening to music. He rarely did. He wore them so people wouldn't try to talk to him, which was a trick his coworker Marcus had taught him 3 years ago, and which remained one of the most useful pieces of advice anyone had ever given him. The headphones were his invisibility. He was 2 blocks from home when he heard it. Not a shout, not a crash. Something quieter and worse, the low, controlled murmur of men who are doing something they don't want to be overheard doing. Logan had grown up in neighborhoods where he'd learned the difference between the sounds that meant nothing and the sounds that meant everything, and this particular register, that careful, deliberate beneath which something ugly was happening, this was the second kind. He slowed. He pulled one headphone free without thinking about it. The alley between the auto parts warehouse and the old dry cleaning building was narrow enough that 2 people walking abreast would have had to turn slightly sideways. Logan didn't go into it. He stopped at the mouth of it in the shadow of the warehouse wall, and he looked. 4 of them. Young, probably somewhere between 19 and 23, the age range that produces the particular kind of recklessness that hasn't yet been taught consequences. They were arranged in a loose semicircle, the way that packs of young men arrange themselves when they want to make clear that there is no direction in which the person at the center can move. The person at the center was old enough to be their grandfather. He was wearing a leather vest, black and weathered, the kind that carries its age the same way old skin does not, in deterioration but in depth, in the accumulation of everything it had endured. There was a patch on the back, white letters on red, and even from where Logan stood he could make out enough of it to know what it said. The man's gray beard was thick and trim clothes, his hair pulled back and his arms visible below the rolled sleeves of a dark shirt were covered in ink that had blurred slightly at the edges, the way old tattoos do, but which still held their shape, their intention. He was bleeding, left side of his face. Not catastrophically, not the kind of bleeding that means something is over, but the kind that tells you the first hit has already landed and the next ones are coming, and the men doing this have decided they don't particularly care what state he's in when they finish. Logan saw all of this in approximately 4 seconds. He also saw in those same 4 seconds what was happening around the alley's mouth. Two men stood near a motorcycle parked against the curb, the old biker's bike clearly a well-maintained machine that had been ridden hard and loved properly. They were doing something to it. One of them had his phone out, possibly filming. Across the street, 3 people stood on the sidewalk. One was holding a paper coffee cup. All 3 were watching. None of them had moved. None of them looked like they were about to move. There is a specific kind of paralysis that strikes ordinary people in moments of violence. Logan understood it. He had felt its first edge himself years ago in a different parking lot, a different neighborhood, a different version of the world he'd grown up in. He did not judge the people across the street. He had been one of them once. He knew precisely how the mind negotiates with itself in those moments, how it builds its arguments, how it tells you that someone else will act, that it isn't your place, that you'll only make it worse, that these things always resolve themselves. He knew all of that. He had simply stopped listening to it somewhere along the way. There was a tire iron on the ground, 6 feet to his left, probably fallen from the bed of a work truck at some point during the day. Logan didn't reach for it immediately. He walked forward first. He walked forward the way he walked into every difficult situation. Not fast, not theatrical, but with a kind of absolute evenness that was, when you were on the receiving end of it, more unsettling than aggression would have been. He walked to the center of the alley. "Back up," he said. "All of you, right now." The nearest one, a thick-necked young man in a red hoodie who was probably accustomed to people reconsidering their involvement at this point, turned to look at him with the slow deliberateness of someone who cannot immediately decide if what they're seeing is a serious development or a comedy. "Walk away," Red Hoodie said. "This doesn't involve you." "I'm making it involve me," Logan said. Later, when people tried to analyze the footage, some of them would fixate on that line, on the flatness of his voice when he said it, on the complete absence of anything that sounded like bravado or performance. Logan Carter said those 5 words the way you say something that you have already thoroughly considered and made peace with. There was no escalation in his tone, no adrenaline spike that you could detect. He said them and then he simply waited, and the waiting was what did it, the fact that he'd said what he said and then just stood there as if he had genuinely accounted for every possible outcome and found none of them particularly alarming. Red Hoodie took a step toward him. Logan stepped forward to meet him, close the distance faster than the other man had calculated, and with one motion that was entirely without flourish, he drove the heel of his palm into the underside of Red Hoodie's chin. The crack of it was audible. Red Hoodie's legs went sideways and he dropped. 3 seconds. The second one, taller, faster, angrier, came in from Logan's right, and Logan didn't turn to meet him, so much as he redirected using the forward momentum of the man's own rush to put him into the warehouse wall face first. The sound of that was different, more final. 5 seconds. The third one had a bottle. He raised it. Logan had already picked up the tire iron from where he'd clocked its position earlier, and he brought it horizontal in a blocking motion that caught the bottle mid-swing and shattered it. The sound of breaking glass in the narrow space was enormous. The third one staggered back, and Logan held the tire iron in a way that was not threatening so much as categorical a statement of fact about the direction this was going to go. 6 seconds. The fourth one, the one who had been hanging back, the one whom Logan had identified from the beginning as the most dangerous, not because of his size, but because of the way he held himself, the fourth one looked at Logan for a long moment. He looked at his 3 associates. He did the arithmetic. Then he jerked his head toward the alley entrance and said something quiet to his guys, and they collected themselves from the ground and from the wall, and they went. No speeches, no threats on the way out. They just left. Logan stood still until they were gone. Then he turned. The old man had braced himself against the alley wall with one hand, and he was watching Logan with an expression that was difficult to read. Not gratitude, not relief, something more complex than either of those, something that moved beneath the surface of his face like a thought he hadn't finished yet. "You hurt?" Logan asked. "I've been worse," the man said. His voice was the voice of someone who had smoked for 20 years and decided one day that was long enough. Deep, slightly roughened, utterly without performance. "The cut on your face needs cleaning," Logan said. He walked to where the man stood and looked at it with the clinical detachment of someone who has spent years in environments where minor wounds are assessed and addressed without drama. It's not deep, but you should get it seen tonight. I've had worse, the man said again. I heard you the first time, Logan said. He checked the motorcycle, checked it the way he checked every piece of machinery he encountered systematically, without commentary, running his hands along the frame, looking at the places where the two men had been standing near it. Nothing appeared to be damaged beyond a few scratches on the tank that were almost certainly not new. Bike's okay, Logan said. I know, the man said. I could tell from here. Logan nodded. He picked up his jacket from where it had fallen during the altercation, folded it back over his forearm. You need anything else, he said. The old man was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be deciding something. What's your name, he said. Logan. Just Logan Carter. Logan Carter. The man nodded slowly. He had the quality of someone who files information away, not for later conversation, but for later action, the nod of a man who does things with what he learns. William Harper, the old man said. People call me Iron Bill. Okay, Logan said. You're not going to ask why they call me that? Figured you'd tell me if it mattered, Logan said. Something moved across Iron Bill's face then. Not quite a smile, not quite surprise. Something adjacent to both something that had the quality of a man encountering something he had been told existed, but had stopped expecting to find. You always do things like that, Iron Bill asked. Just walk in when nobody else will. Logan thought about it for a moment. Not the theatrical pause of someone constructing a meaningful answer, but the genuine consideration of someone who takes questions seriously. I don't think about it like that, he said finally. I just can't stand still when something's wrong. Never really could. He said goodnight. He walked home. He didn't record anything. He didn't tell anyone. He ate leftover pasta that his mother had made and left covered on the stove, washed his own plate, and was asleep by 9:45. He believed completely and without any particular drama that the story was over. 3 miles away is the parking lot of a bar that the local chapter of the Hells Angels had used as an informal meeting point for longer than the city had bothered to enforce the zoning restrictions against it. Iron Bill Harper sat on his bike and did not go inside. He sat there for a long time. He was 61 years old and he had been riding with the club since he was 20, which meant he had 4 decades of accumulated experience with human beings in extreme circumstances. He had seen men who looked fearless crumble and men who looked ordinary become extraordinary. And he had learned over those 40 years that the difference between those categories was almost never what it appeared to be from the outside. The thing about Logan Carter was not the 6 seconds. It was not the skill of what he had done. Though the skill had been real and the efficiency of it had been the kind of thing that only came from either extensive training or years of necessity, and Iron Bill had seen immediately that it was the latter. The thing about Logan Carter was the afterward. He had walked away, no recording, no posturing, no lingering to receive any acknowledgement. He had checked the bike, not the man, because he had already determined the man's injuries were manageable and moved to the next concern in order of priority, and then he had said goodnight. He had said goodnight the way you say goodnight to someone you're simply done talking to with no particular weight on it, no invitation for gratitude. Iron Bill had spent 40 years looking for young men who possessed what that young blonde mechanic had in the alley. He had found very few. His phone buzzed. One of the boys from inside wondering where he was. Iron Bill typed back, "Give me a minute." He sat in the dark parking lot and thought about Logan Carter, who was by now almost certainly already home, and who almost certainly had not thought about the incident again because it had been to him simply what you did when you encountered something that was wrong. That was the part that Iron Bill couldn't shake. Not the courage. Courage he'd seen plenty of. The indifference to recognition, the complete absence of any need for the act to mean something beyond the act itself. That was rarer than people understood. Tell you, the footage surfaced at 11:23 p.m. One of the young men who had been in the alley, not the one who had filmed deliberately, but the one who had been holding his phone absently the way people hold their phones now as a default posture, had captured 31 seconds of clean, unobstructed footage of the entire encounter. His phone had been angled slightly upward from where he stood, which meant the lighting was better than it had any right to be, and the sound recording was clear enough that every word could be heard. He posted it apparently as a joke, a look what happened to us kind of post aimed at his circle of friends, probably expecting sympathy or dark humor in return. By midnight, it had 40,000 views. By 2 in the morning, it had passed 200,000. By sunrise, the number was in the millions. Iron Bill was one of the first people who saw it in the context of who he was and what it showed. His nephew, a young man named Chris, who managed the club's social media presence with the weary competence of someone who had accepted a job he hadn't fully understood, when he agreed to it, texted him a link at midnight with a message that said simply, "That's you." Iron Bill watched it 4 times. Then he called Chris back. "Find out who he is," he said. "The guy who helped you." "Logan Carter," Iron Bill said. "He told me his name, but I want to know everything else." Chris was quiet for a moment. "How far back do you want me to go?" "Far enough," Iron Bill said, "but I don't want to know about anything bad. I want to know about the kind of man he is. You understand what I'm asking?" "Yeah," Chris said. "I understand." Duh. It took Chris and 2 other men 3 days. What they found was not dramatic in the sense that there were no revelations, no surprising depths, no hidden dimensions that contradicted the surface impression. Logan Carter was as far as they could determine exactly who the 6 seconds suggested he was, except that the 6 seconds had been, as Iron Bill had suspected, simply the first public evidence of a private consistency that had been operating completely unacknowledged for years. He worked 60 to 65 hours a week at Darnell's Auto and Diesel on the industrial stretch off 7th. He had been there since he was 19. He had been offered better paying positions at 2 other shops and turned both of them down when Chris tracked down one of the owners who had made an offer, the man said with a mixture of frustration and respect. He said Darnell gave him a chance when nobody else would, said he wasn't the type to walk out on that. He lived with his mother, Patricia, in a 2-bedroom apartment on the eastern edge of the neighborhood. Patricia Carter was 53 years old and had been dealing with severe rheumatoid arthritis for the better part of a decade, the kind that had slowly reduced her range of employment options until the only work she could do reliably was part-time bookkeeping from home, and even that, Chris gathered from talking to one of their neighbors, was becoming harder for her to manage. Logan had been the primary earner in the household for 5 years. He did not talk about this. When his coworkers asked about his mother, he said she was fine. When his supervisor Darnell had once offered him an advance to cover what he evidently suspected was a financial shortfall, at home, Logan had thanked him and declined and been back to full performance the following Monday. The neighbors knew things that Logan had never mentioned to anyone at work. Mrs. Vasquez, who lived 2 floors below the Carters and was 81 years old, and drove an 11-year-old Civic that was by most assessments held together primarily by hope, had mentioned to Chris's contact that Logan had been quietly maintaining her car for 3 years. No charge, no conversation about it. She would come out in the morning to find that the oil had been changed or that the brake pads she'd been nervously aware of for 6 months had been replaced, or that the rattling in the passenger door that had been bothering her since before Christmas had simply stopped. She had asked Logan about it once. He had said he'd noticed it was getting worse and figured he'd look at it. She had tried to give him money. He had said no 4 times, accepted a piece of her empanada once, and the conversation had been closed. There were 2 other cars on the block in similar arrangements. An older woman named Dolores, a retired postal worker named George, whose truck had been by Chris's informant's account borderline inoperable 18 months ago and was now inexplicably running better than it had in years. The veterans thing took longer to find because Logan had routed it carefully, if not intentionally. He gave to an organization called Open Road Foundation through a payroll deduction that took $120 out of each of his biweekly paychecks. He had set this up quietly enough that his coworkers didn't know about it. His mother didn't know the specific amount, though she knew he gave. When Chris found the records through a contact at the organization who confirmed the donations with appropriate discretion, he sat with that information for a long time. $120 per check, on a diesel mechanic's salary, while supporting a mother with chronic illness, in a city where the cost of everything had been climbing for 3 straight years. He had been doing it for 4 years. Chris brought everything to Iron Bill in a folder, old school printed, organized, flagged with tabs the way Iron Bill had always preferred his information. They sat at the table in the back of the bar, the good one, the one the club used for meetings that mattered, and Chris walked through it while Iron Bill read. When Chris was done talking, Iron Bill closed the folder and was quiet. "The 6 seconds, Chris said carefully. "You see what I mean?" "Yeah," Iron Bill said. "It wasn't a moment? Chris said. It was just the first time anyone happened to be filming. Iron Bill nodded. He looked at the folder. He thought about a 24-year-old mechanic walking 14 blocks home in the same work pants every day, skipping the promotion that would have paid him better because he didn't walk out on people who believed in him. Changing the oil on an 81-year-old woman's car at some point before she woke up routing $120 per paycheck to veterans without telling his mother the amount. He ever done anything like this before? Chris asked. The physical intervention thing. Probably, Iron Bill said. We just don't know about it. He stood up. He was quiet for another minute. Then he said the thing that would later become the headline, though he wasn't thinking in those terms when he said it. He was just thinking out loud the way he always thought when something had broken through whatever defenses his 40 years of experience had constructed around his capacity for genuine surprise. The whole country deserves to know who this young man really is, Iron Bill said. He said it the way he said everything important plainly without decoration, as a simple statement of something that had become in his mind a fact. Chris looked at him. You want to do something public. I want to do something honest, Iron Bill said. There's a difference. What Iron Bill authorized over the next 72 hours was not by the standards of anything the Hells Angels typically did an unusual display of organizational capacity. They were a group that had, for better or worse, and across a complicated history demonstrated repeatedly that when they decided something warranted their collective attention, they could mobilize with the speed and coordination that most organizations far larger than themselves could not match. What was unusual was the purpose. Chris had handled the communication phone calls, not texts, because Iron Bill had opinions about digital trails, and also because some things required voice, and by the evening of the second day, he had confirmations from chapters across 4 states. Not every man who responded was someone Iron Bill knew personally, but every man who responded had seen the footage, and every man who had seen the footage had come to the same conclusion without being told what that conclusion was. The word had moved the way certain kinds of truth moved without needing to be pushed. By the morning of day 3, the number stood at 297. Chris had made contact with Logan Carter through a method that had required some ingenuity. Logan had no social media presence that they could find, which was itself a data point that Chris noted in his mental file on the man, and had ultimately reached him through Darnell's Auto and Diesel, through Darnell himself, who had answered the phone with the wariness of a man who had been getting a great deal of unusual attention lately and was not entirely sure he was managing it well. Chris had explained what the club intended to do. Darnell had been quiet for a long time. Then he had said, "Does he know we'd like to tell him?" Chris had said. "Is he there?" "He's under a Freightliner right now," Darnell had said. "Give me a minute." There had been the sound of Darnell's footsteps, then his voice calling across the shop floor, "Carter, phone." Then Logan's voice clear and close, very slightly out of breath. "Yeah." Chris had introduced himself, had explained briefly and without embellishment what was going to happen on Thursday morning. The silence on Logan's end had lasted 4 seconds. Chris counted. "How many did you say?" Logan said. "Close to 300, Chris said. Another silence. Shorter. "I didn't do anything that needed that kind of attention," Logan said. "That's actually one of the reasons," Chris said. Logan didn't say anything. "Be at the shop," Chris told him. "Just be there doing what you always do. That's all we're asking." There was the particular quality of silence that comes from someone who is genuinely uncertain, not performing uncertainty, but actually standing in the middle of something they haven't finished processing yet. "All right," Logan said finally. He hung up. Darnell, who had been standing 3 feet away listening to the entire conversation with his arms crossed and an expression on his face that he would later describe as somewhere between proud and terrified, looked at Logan for a moment. "You okay?" Darnell said. "Yeah," Logan said. "You sure?" "I'll be better once I finish this transmission," Logan said, and he went back under the Freightliner. Logan went home that night and sat at the kitchen table. His mother was in the living room. He could hear the sound of the television, the news which she always watched because she said it helped her feel connected to the world in a way that her limited mobility sometimes made difficult. Patricia Carter was in the word people who loved her used to describe her formidable. She was a small woman who had been made smaller by the progression of her illness and who responded to this reduction of her physical capacity with a kind of steady combativeness that never became bitterness. She had opinions about everything, delivered them with a precision that made arguments with her exhausting, and possessed a radar for her son's emotional state that he had spent 24 years unable to effectively conceal anything from. She called from the living room. "You're sitting too quiet." "I'm just sitting," Logan said. "You sit loud when something's on your mind. Come in here." He got up and went into the living room and sat in the chair across from the couch where she had her legs elevated, the position her physical therapist had recommended, and which she maintained with the grudging discipline of someone who has learned the hard way that the PET is right. "What happened?" she said. He told her. He started with the alley, which she already knew about because she had seen the footage on her phone 3 days ago sent to her by a neighbor. His mother had more social media presence than he did, which was a fact Logan found consistently surprising, and had said to him at dinner that night, "That was you in that video." And he had said yes, and she had looked at him for a long moment and then nodded and said, "Eat your food," which was her way of saying she had known. Of course she had known. This was not a surprise to her, this was simply a confirmation. But he told her the rest of it now, about the call from Chris, about 300 riders. His mother listened without interrupting, which was unusual. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. 300, she said. "Something close to that," Logan said. She looked at him. Her eyes had the quality of someone who has been reading a book for a long time and has just arrived at a page she had been expecting. "What are you feeling?" she said. "I don't know," Logan said. "Uncomfortable mostly." "Why?" "Because I don't need it," he said. "I didn't do it for this." "I know that," she said. "So does everyone else. That's why they're coming." He shook his head, not in disagreement, more in the manner of someone trying to arrange something that doesn't quite fit into the container they've been given. "It was 6 seconds, Mom." Patricia Carter looked at her son for a long moment. Her hands, which hurt her in weather like this, were folded in her lap. "Logan," she said, "I've been watching you for 24 years. You want to tell me it was just 6 seconds?" He didn't answer. "Go to bed," she said. "You have work tomorrow." He stood up. He bent down and kissed her on the top of her head, which he did every night, had done every night for longer than either of them had kept track of. "Mom," he said. "What?" "I don't know how to do this kind of thing," he said. "The attention." She reached up and patted his hand once with the particular economy of affection that had always been her style. "Same way you do everything else," she said. "Just don't make a big deal out of it." He went to bed. He set his alarm for 6, the same as every morning. He lay in the dark for a while, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a parking lot full of motorcycles and a man named William Harper, who had filed his name away with the expression of someone who knew exactly what they were going to do with it. Then he stopped thinking about it because thinking about things he couldn't change or control had never been his particular habit, and he slept. Thursday arrived with the particular quality of mornings in Phoenix in the spring, dry and clear and sharp. At the edges, the kind of air that makes everything seem slightly more defined than usual, as if the world has been adjusted for clarity. Logan was at the shop at 7:15. Darnell was already there, which was unusual for Darnell, who typically arrived at 7:45 and spent the first 15 minutes of every shift complaining about traffic in a way that implied personal offense. "You're early," Logan said. "Don't make a thing of it," Darnell said. Logan hung his jacket and went to the Frauentliner. By 9:30, he had finished the transmission. He had started 2 days prior, had completed a brake inspection on a commercial van, and had begun a diagnostic on a pickup that had been brought in with a misfire that its owner had described with the colorful imprecision of non-mechanics everywhere as sounding wrong. Logan had isolated the issue to a fouled injector on cylinder 4 within the first 12 minutes, and was working through the repair with the focused efficiency that Darnell had on more than one occasion described to other shop owners as the best diagnostic mind I've hired in 30 years, and I've hired a lot. The sound arrived at 10:17. Logan was under the pickup. He heard it before he felt it, and he felt it before he fully processed what he was hearing, a low collective rumble that built from somewhere to the east and grew with the steady, inevitable quality of something that has been organized and is now arriving at its destination. He slid out from under the pickup. Darnell was standing at the bay doors. He was not moving. His arms were at his sides, and his face had an expression on it that Logan had never seen on Darnell's face before, and Darnell was not, generally speaking, a man who wore unfamiliar expressions. "They're coming," Darnell said. Logan stood up. He wiped his hands on the rag he kept tucked into his back pocket, A habit so ingrained it was reflexive, and he walked to the bay door and stood next to Darnell and looked. The first riders appeared at the far end of the block, then more behind them, then more behind those. They came in formation, not military precision, but the organized ease of people who have done this many times and understand the unspoken choreography of it. Two abreast in most places, single file in the narrower stretches, filling the street from one end to the other in a progression that seemed to have no end. The engines were not quiet. That was the first physical fact of it. The sound of nearly 300 motorcycles moving through an industrial neighborhood was not merely loud. It was total. It was the kind of sound that gets into your chest and reorganizes whatever was happening there before it arrived. People had come out of the shops and offices along the block. Some had phones raised. Others were simply standing, watching with the specific stillness of people encountering something they did not have a category for. Logan stood at the mouth of the bay. He was not performing stillness. He was simply still in the way. He was still when he was thinking. Not frozen, not rigid, but present in the very specific way of someone who has decided to take in exactly what is happening without putting anything over the top of it. The bike stopped. They stopped the way iron filings stop when a magnet is removed all at once, without a signal that Logan could identify, in a coordination that was either practiced or instinctive or some combination of both. The sound cut out. In the silence that followed, Logan became aware of how many people had gathered. Not just the workers from the neighboring shops, families, people who had evidently driven here. A news van had parked at the end of the block, and a helicopter was doing something methodical overhead, and Logan, who had spent 24 years being almost professionally invisible, was now standing at the center of something that was visible to what seemed like a significant portion of the city of Phoenix. He didn't move. Iron Bill got off his motorcycle. He was wearing the same vest, or one exactly like it, and he moved with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who has spent 40 years deciding when and how to make an entrance, and has long since stopped performing it and simply lives it. He walked through the gathered crowd, which parted without being asked, and he walked up to Logan Carter and stopped 2 feet from him and looked at him. Logan looked back. "Surprise," Iron Bill said. "Trying to figure out the right word for it," Logan said. "I'll give you a minute," Iron Bill said. He turned to the crowd then. His voice, when he projected it, had the quality of someone who has addressed large groups enough times that it is no longer an effort. It simply became what it needed to be, clear and carrying and without strain. He spoke about what had happened in the alley. He didn't embellish it. He said what occurred in the sequence it had occurred, and he said it in the tone of a man giving testimony rather than telling a story, because the distinction mattered to him and was audible in the way he delivered it. Then he talked about Logan Carter. He talked about Darnell's shop and the promotions Logan had declined. He talked about Patricia Carter and what it meant to carry what her son was carrying at 24 years old without ever making it anyone else's burden. He talked about an 81-year-old woman named Mrs. Vasquez, who had found her car maintained every few months by someone who never left a note. He talked about Open Road Foundation and a payroll deduction that had been running for 4 years. He didn't sensationalize any of it. He just said it. The crowd was very quiet. At some point during the telling, Logan became aware that his mother was there. He didn't know when she had arrived, didn't know how Darnell, he would figure out later, had called her before Logan arrived that morning. She was standing 20 feet to his left, next to a woman he didn't recognize, who was keeping a hand lightly on Patricia's elbow in case she needed it. His mother was watching Iron Bill speak. Her face had the expression she always had when something was true, a kind of settled, deliberate attention that meant she was making sure she got all of it. When Iron Bill finished what he had to say about Logan Carter's life, he paused. Then he said the thing. "Respect isn't earned by patches," he said. "It's earned by the choices you make when nobody is watching." He looked at Logan when he said it, not for effect, because it was true and he was saying it to the person it was about. The crowd exhaled, and then without a word being spoken between them, 297 riders raised one fist. Not in aggression, not in spectacle, in the oldest gesture men have for acknowledging something that deserves to be acknowledged, a closed fist raised held steady. Logan stood at the bay door of Darnell's Auto and Diesel in his work clothes with his hands at his sides. He did not cry. He was not a man who cried in public, and this moment did not change that. But he looked at the raised fists, and then he looked at Iron Bill, and he said something quietly enough that only Iron Bill heard it. I still don't think I did anything that big, he said. Iron Bill looked at him. His expression was the one he'd had in the alley, that complex evaluative thing that lived beneath the surface of his face. That's the whole point, Iron Bill said. You never thought any of it was big. That's what big looks like. The fists came down one at a time. Not all at once, the way they had gone up, unified and deliberate, but slowly, rider by rider, like a tide going out. And in the space that the gesture left behind, the crowd seemed to exhale as one. In the industrial block that had never in its existence been the center of anything, returned to something resembling ordinary air. Logan was still standing at the bay door. He hadn't moved during Iron Bill's speech. He hadn't moved when the fists went up. He stood the same way he stood under a vehicle when something wasn't adding up, yet patient, committed to the problem, refusing to move on until he understood it completely. The difference was that right now he wasn't sure the problem had a solution he was equipped to compute. Darnell appeared at his shoulder, not saying anything, just there the way Darnell had always been there, the man who had hired a 19-year-old kid who'd come in off the street with a resume that was half references from teachers and half a handwritten list of every engine he had ever worked on, and had looked at that resume for approximately 30 seconds before saying, "You start Monday." "You okay?" Darnell said. "You called my mother," Logan said. "Guilty," Darnell said. "How early before you got here?" Logan nodded. He was quiet for a moment. "She shouldn't have had to stand the whole time. Her knees—" "She didn't stand the whole time," Darnell said. "I had a chair brought out. She refused it twice and then sat down. You know how she is." "Yeah," Logan said. "I know how she is." He looked across the crowd to where Patricia Carter was now accepting what appeared to be a conversation from a woman he still didn't recognize, and his mother was doing the thing she always did in conversations, leaning forward, slightly attentive, as if the person she was talking to had her complete and undivided interest. It was a quality she had given Logan without meaning, to the capacity to make whoever was speaking to you feel like the only person in the room. He had never thought of it as a skill until he was old enough to realize how rare it was. Iron Bill walked back to him. The crowd was dispersing slowly in the unhurried way of people who don't quite want to leave something they've been part of. Several riders had gotten off their bikes and were standing in small groups talking. A few had walked over to the shop and were looking through the bay doors at the work inside with the focused appreciation of people who know what they're looking at. "You need a minute," Iron Bill said. "I'm fine," Logan said. "Nobody's fine after that," Iron Bill said. "Don't insult either of us." Logan looked at him. Iron Bill had the particular quality of someone who had spent decades saying exactly what he meant and had lost patience somewhere along the way with the social conventions that asked you to pretend otherwise. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it," Logan said. "The attention, I don't—" He stopped, started again. "I know what to do when something's broken. I know what to do when somebody needs something. This is different." "You don't have to do anything with it," Iron Bill said. "That's what I wanted you to hear today. You don't owe anybody a performance. The whole point was to say what's true. What happens after that is up to you." Logan was quiet. "But there is something I'd like to talk to you about," Iron Bill said. "When you're ready. Not today. Take a few days." "What kind of something?" Logan said, because he was at his core a man who found vagueness uncomfortable and precision reassuring. Iron Bill almost smiled. "The kind that changes things," he said, "but only if you want them changed." He left it there. He walked back toward the gathered others, stopping along the way to exchange words with a few of them, a hand on a shoulder here, a quiet conversation there, with the ease of a man moving through a world he had built and understood. Logan watched him go. Then Darnell said, "You know you're on every major news channel right now." "I figured," Logan said. "The helicopter," Darnell said. "Yeah, I noticed the helicopter." "Your phone's going to start." "I don't have notifications on," Logan said. Darnell stared at him. "Of course you don't," he said with the tone of a man who has long since stopped being surprised by Logan Carter, and who remains surprised by him constantly. "Get back to work. I'll handle the reporters." "You sure?" "I've been handling things since before you were born," Darnell said. "Go fix the truck." Logan went back to the truck. It was the most normal thing he'd done in 3 days, and it felt like standing on solid ground after a stretch of walking on ice. The video of the ceremony, the 37-minute version that a news drone had captured in its entirety, went live on 3 separate local news stations by noon. By 2 in the afternoon, the national outlets had picked it up. By the time Logan's shift ended at 6, the combined view count across all platforms had passed 12 million. Logan did not check any of this. He went home, ate dinner with his mother, and listened to her describe with the detailed precision of a woman who had spent the afternoon at the center of something historic and intended to report on it thoroughly every conversation she had managed to have during the ceremony. There was a woman, Patricia said. Sarah. She rode in from Flagstaff this morning, left at 5 a.m. to be here. Why, Logan said. Because she wanted to, Patricia said. Because she said the video of the alley reminded her of something her husband used to say, and her husband died 8 years ago, and she wanted to be in the same place as the person who made her think of him. Logan set down his fork. His mother watched him. She wasn't the only one, Patricia said. There was a man, retired Vietnam veteran, came with the chapter from Tucson. He told me she paused the way she paused when something had genuinely affected her, and she was deciding how much of that to show. He said he'd stopped believing people like you still existed. He said he didn't mean that as a compliment to you specifically. He meant it as a comment on what he'd seen of the world lately. And you, Logan said, what about me? What did you tell people? Patricia Carter picked up her fork. She was quiet for a moment in the way that meant she had the answer and was choosing how to say it. I told them you've been this way since you were 7 years old, she said, and that I've spent 17 years trying to figure out whether I taught you that or whether you came into the world already knowing it. Which do you think? Logan said. I think, his mother said carefully, that I gave you the beginning of it. I think the rest of it is entirely yours. She looked at him. And I think it terrifies me sometimes how far you'll go with it. It was 6 seconds, Logan said. Stop saying that, Patricia said. You sound like you're apologizing for something. He didn't say it again. They finished dinner. Logan washed the dishes. His mother went back to the living room and her television, and Logan sat at the kitchen table for a while with a cup of coffee that went cold before he drank half of it, thinking about what Iron Bill had said. The kind that changes things, but only if you want them changed. The thing was, Logan Carter was not a man who feared change on principle. He was a man who was careful about which changes he trusted. The world was full of offers that looked like opportunities and turned out to be obligations wearing a different coat. He had seen it happen to people. He knew the job that promised everything and delivered debt, the relationship that promised partnership and produced dependence. He had learned early to be exact about what he was accepting before he accepted it, and the precision of that instinct had served him well. But Iron Bill was not a man who dealt in false coats. Logan had known that within the first 60 seconds of meeting him in the alley. There was something in the way Iron Bill conducted himself, a directness that was almost blunt, a total absence of the ambient performance that most people layered over everything they said, that told you this man said what he meant and meant what he said, and the consequences of that were your problem to manage, not his. He went to bed at 10. He did not sleep easily, but he slept. The next 48 hours happened around Logan rather than to him. The news coverage continued because the news was in the business of continuing, and a story that had 12 million views in a genuinely photogenic ceremony and a human interest angle that practically wrote itself was not a story that networks were prepared to release without exhausting every angle first. A producer from a morning talk show called Darnell's shop 3 times. Darnell answered each call with the same 4 words, "He's not available," and hung up. On the 3rd call, the producer suggested a significant sum of money, and Darnell said the same 4 words at the same volume and hung up for the 3rd time and went back to the estimate he'd been writing. Online, it was different because the internet operates by different rules. Rules that are essentially the absence of rules, and the Logan Carter story had by now achieved the kind of velocity that meant it no longer needed any particular person to keep it moving. It moved on its own. It became a thread of conversation in places that had nothing to do with Phoenix or mechanics or the Hells Angels in parent groups, in veteran forums, in community boards, in the comment sections of news articles about completely unrelated subjects. People referenced it as shorthand for something they were trying to say about decency or courage or what it meant to act without the need for recognition. Logan was aware of approximately none of this in any detailed sense. He knew in the abstract that something was happening online because his coworker Marcus had taken to reading him choice excerpts from the comments sections over lunch with the enthusiastic energy of a man who has discovered that someone he knows is famous and finds this genuinely thrilling. And Logan had listened to 3 of these readings before saying, "Marcus, I appreciate it, but I really don't need to know what strangers on the internet think about me." And Marcus had said, "How are you like this?" in a tone of pure baffled admiration. What Logan was paying attention to was the work. He was, as of that week, in the middle of a particularly complex engine rebuild on a 40-year-old Kenworth that its owner, a man named Pete, who ran a small independent hauling operation and who had bought the truck used and clearly paid too much for it, had brought in with such extensive damage that Darnell had initially suggested Pete might want to consider whether the truck was worth saving. Logan had looked at it for an hour and then told Darnell that it was worth saving and that he wanted to do it. This was not unusual. Logan had a specific relationship with machines that other people had written off a conviction that things deserved to be repaired, rather than replaced when repair was honest, a belief in the difference between something that was truly beyond recovery and something that simply required more patience than most people were willing to give it. Pete had been coming in every other day to check on progress, which was the habit of a man who doesn't entirely trust that the thing he's depending on is actually being handled, and which Logan understood and did not resent. On Thursday of that week, 4 days after the ceremony, Pete came in and stood at the edge of the bay and watched Logan work for a while. "You're that guy," Pete said, "the one on the news." "I'm the one fixing your truck," Logan said. "I know," Pete said. He paused. "My son wanted me to get your autograph." Logan looked up from the engine block. "Your son," Logan said. "He's 14, Pete said. He watched the alley video about 50 times. He said—" Pete stopped. He was a big man, the kind of big that comes from decades of physical work, and he had the specific discomfort of someone not accustomed to being emotional in public. He said he wants to be the kind of person who doesn't stand still. Logan held that for a moment. "Tell him he already knows how," Logan said. Pete frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he already knows what it feels like when something is wrong," Logan said. "He's known it his whole life. The thing he has to practice is the part where he doesn't talk himself out of it." Pete was quiet for a long moment. Something moved across his face. "Yeah," Pete said. "Yeah, okay." He nodded. "How's the truck?" "Good," Logan said. Week and a half." "That's faster than Darnell said." "Darnell's an optimist about timelines," Logan said. "He said 2 months, Pete said. "Darnell's a pessimist about timelines," Logan corrected. "I always forget which way he goes." Pete laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised out of him, loose and genuine, and it changed the temperature of the bay for a moment. He left without asking for the autograph. Logan suspected he would tell his son what had been said instead, which was better. Iron Bill called on Friday morning, not Chris. Iron Bill directly from his own phone, which Logan now had in his contacts because Chris had sent it the same day he'd made the initial call about the ceremony. "You said a few days," Logan said when he answered. "It's been 4 days, Iron Bill said. "That's a few," Logan said. "You ready to talk?" "Depends on what we're talking about," Logan said. He was on his lunch break sitting on the bench outside the shop where he took all his calls because inside was too loud for anything requiring actual concentration. "Come to the workshop tomorrow," Iron Bill said. "Saturday, bring your mother if she's able. I want her there." "Why?" "Because what I'm going to offer affects her too," Iron Bill said, "and she deserves to be part of the conversation." Logan was quiet for a moment. He had expected many possible versions of this call, and this was not quite any of them. He had expected something that was more straightforwardly about him, a job offer maybe, or some kind of public role in whatever the club's charitable work looked like. He had not expected to be asked to bring his mother. "She'll want to know what she's walking into," Logan said. "Tell her it's a conversation," Iron Bill said. "Nothing more than that. She's not signing anything. Nobody's asking for anything. I want to have a conversation with both of you in the same room." "She's going to ask me questions I can't answer," Logan said. "Then tell her that," Iron Bill said. "She sounds like a woman who can handle not knowing something for 24 hours. "She can," Logan said. "She won't like it." "Fair enough," Iron Bill said. 10 o'clock. He gave the address. Logan wrote it on the back of a receipt from the wash station across the street and put it in his pocket. He sat on the bench for a while after he hung up. The afternoon traffic on 7th was doing what it always did, moving with the specific impatience of a city that is always 3 minutes behind wherever it needs to be, and Logan watched it without really watching it the way he watched things when his attention was somewhere else. He thought about what he knew of the Hells Angels. He was not a man who operated on stereotype. He had grown up in a neighborhood that had taught him early that the gap between reputation and reality was in most cases wider than people admitted. And what he knew from personal experience was limited to Iron Bill, who had not behaved in the alley or in any subsequent interaction like a man who matched whatever reputation preceded him. What he knew from everything else was complicated and contradictory and not particularly useful as a guide for decision-making. What he knew specifically was this: the man who had organized 300 riders to show up on a Tuesday morning in an industrial district on behalf of a mechanic they had never met was not a simple man, and the offer he was going to make tomorrow was not a simple offer, and whatever Logan decided in that room tomorrow would not be a simple decision. He also knew that it had been a long time since anyone had offered him anything, and that the few times anyone had offered him something good, the right response had almost always been to pay more attention to who was offering than to what was being offered. He trusted Iron Bill. He didn't entirely know why yet, but he trusted him, and he had learned early in his life that when his instincts spoke with that particular quiet certainty, not loudness, not urgency, just clarity, the right thing to do was listen. He went back inside and finished the afternoon shift. He told his mother that night. Patricia received the news the way she received most things, by asking 3 precise questions and then being quiet while she thought about the answers. He specifically asked for me, she said. Yes. Not as a courtesy, he specifically wants me there. That's what he said. Why? He said, what I'm being offered affects you, Logan said. He wants you to be part of the conversation. Patricia absorbed this. What time? 10. Can we drive there, or does it require? I looked it up, Logan said. It's not far. Parking's fine. She nodded slowly. And you trust him? It wasn't a question. She was reading him the way she had always been able to read him, with the ease of a woman who has spent 24 years studying a person she made. Yeah, Logan said, I do. Why? He thought about it. He's not trying to make me into something, Logan said. Every person who's talked to me this week is trying to make the thing that happened mean something specific to them. He's the only one who talked about it and made me feel like what it actually was. Which is what, she said. Ordinary, Logan said. In the right sense of the word. The sense where ordinary isn't a negative thing, it just means consistent. It means the kind of person you are every day, yet not the person you are when someone's watching. Patricia looked at her son for a long moment. All right, she said. 10 o'clock. The workshop was larger than Logan expected, which was itself a revelation about what he had expected. He had anticipated something adjacent to a garage functional spare, organized in the particular way of spaces that are designed for work rather than presentation. What he found was closer to a serious fabrication facility. 8 bays all occupied the air, carrying the specific smell of metal and machinery that Logan had grown up with, and associated not with danger or roughness, but with the concentration of skilled people doing skilled work. Iron Bill met them in the lot. He shook Logan's hand and then turned to Patricia, and without any particular ceremony extended his hand to her as well. Patricia shook it with the firm directness that was her standard mode of meeting people, and she looked at Iron Bill the way she looked at everything she was genuinely evaluating, with her full attention and without the social buffer that most people kept between themselves and direct assessment. You're the man my son helped, she said. Yes, ma'am, Iron Bill said. And now you're going to help him, she said. It was not a question, and it was not an accusation. It was a woman establishing the terms of the conversation so that everyone understood them before the conversation began. That's the intention, Iron Bill said. If he wants it. Let's go inside, Patricia said. They went inside. Iron Bill walked them through the workshop first. Not as a sales pitch, he didn't move through it with the energy of a man showing off something he wants you to be impressed by. He moved through it the way he moved through everything, with the practical economy of someone for whom these spaces were simply where work happened, and the work itself was the thing that mattered. He introduced Logan to 4 men as they walked a master fabricator named Ray, who had been working custom motorcycles for 30 years and whose hands told the same story Logan's hands told just in a different language. A man named Jorge who handled electrical systems and who had, within 30 seconds of meeting Logan, begun asking him technical questions about a diagnostic issue he'd been puzzling over. Not because he was testing Logan, but because he was genuinely puzzled, and Logan was clearly the kind of person who might know the answer. Two others whose names Logan registered and filed with the precision he applied to all information that might matter later. These were not performers. They were craftsmen. Logan recognized the difference immediately, the way you recognize a thing you are yourself. They sat at a table in a back office, not the impressive version of a back office, but the functional kind with coffee cups that had been used multiple times today, and a whiteboard with things written on it that hadn't been erased. Iron Bill sat across from Logan and Patricia. He poured coffee without asking if they wanted it, set the cups in front of them, and folded his hands on the table. "I'm going to tell you what I want to offer," he said, "and then I'm going to stop talking and let you ask every question you have. And I mean every question. Nothing's off the table." "All right," Logan said. "The club has a charitable foundation," Iron Bill said. "It's been operating for 11 years. It does a few different things: veteran support, community work, some scholarship stuff, but the piece I care most about is the apprenticeship program. We run it through this workshop. Young people, mostly young men, some young women who have mechanical aptitude and no path. We put them with master craftsmen. We pay for their certifications. We give them a trade and we give them a career." He paused. "The program's been running for 4 years. It works, but it's missing something." He looked at Logan. "It needs people who can teach the other part of it." "Which part?" Logan said. "The part that can't be certified," Iron Bill said. "The part that's about what kind of person you are when you're doing the work. What you do when something's hard and you could cut the corner and nobody would know. What you do when someone's depending on you and you're tired. What you do when you've been given something valuable by someone who believed in you when they didn't have to." The room was very quiet. "That's what's hard to find," Iron Bill said. "I can find people who can weld. I can find people who can build an engine from the ground up. I can find certified instructors coming out of every trade school in the state. But finding someone who has the skill and the character to teach both of those things at once." He stopped. "You understand what I'm saying? You're not just offering me a key," Logan said. "No," Iron Bill said. "I'm offering you a role, an apprenticeship to start, because that's what's honest. You'd learn custom motorcycle fabrication from Ray. You'd cross-train on the electrical side. You'd get the certifications the program supports. All of that. But the long-term vision is that you become one of the people who shapes what this program is." He looked at Patricia then. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "the foundation has a medical assistance component. We've worked with several families in circumstances I understand you're navigating. I'm not in the business of charity, and I'm not offering this as charity. I'm offering it as part of a complete arrangement because the people who do the work here matter, and the people who matter have people who depend on them, and we don't pretend those things are separate." Patricia was quiet. Logan watched his mother's face do something he had rarely seen it do. She was not a woman who was easily moved in public. She had, by necessity and by character, built a composure around herself that was not coldness, but was the disciplined version of warmth, the kind that doesn't spend itself carelessly. But something in what Iron Bill had just said had gotten through that, and Logan could see the effort it took her not to respond to it immediately. "You looked into us," she said. "We did," Iron Bill said. "I want to be straight with you about that. We needed to know who your son was, and knowing who he was meant knowing what he was carrying." "And what is he carrying?" Patricia said. Quietly, with the evenness of a woman who already knows the answer and wants to hear someone else say it. "More than he should have to at 24, Iron Bill said. "And he's done it without complaint and without using it as an excuse for anything, which is rarer than people understand." Patricia looked at Iron Bill for a long moment. "Logan," she said without looking away from Iron Bill, "do you want this?" Logan thought about it. He gave it the genuine consideration he gave everything, because giving things genuine consideration was the only way he knew how to make a decision he could live with. He thought about the Kenworth in Bay 3 at Darnell's and the particular satisfaction of being the person who saw something others had given up on and deciding it was worth the effort. He thought about what it would mean to do that work in a context where the work itself was the point, not the throughput, not the billing, not the quota, but the work and what it made of the person doing it. He thought about Pete's 14-year-old son, who wanted to be the kind of person who didn't stand still, and what it would have meant to him at 14 to have someone show him not just the skill, but the character that went with the skill. He thought about his mother. "Yeah," he said, "I do, but I have a condition." Iron Bill waited. "Darnell," Logan said, "he's the reason I have what I have. He took a chance on a 19-year-old kid with a handwritten resume, and he never once made me feel like I owed him for it, which is exactly how I knew I did. Whatever you're building here, if there's a role for his kind of operation, if there's a partnership or a referral relationship, or something that means he's part of it and not left out of it." He stopped. "I'm not walking out on Darnell. I won't do it." The room was quiet. Iron Bill looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "I was wondering when you'd say something like that." "You were expecting it," Logan said. "I was hoping for it," Iron Bill said. "There's a difference." He uncapped a pen and pulled a legal pad from beneath the pile of papers on his desk. "Tell me about Darnell's operation," he said. "Tell me what he needs," Logan told him. He was precise about it, the way he was precise about everything: the scale of the shop, the kind of work, the quality of Darnell's expertise, the gap between what Darnell was capable of and what his resources allowed him to access. He talked for 12 minutes without being interrupted because Iron Bill was the kind of listener who understood that the first time someone gives you information they've been holding, you do not interrupt them. When Logan finished, Iron Bill set down the pen. He looked at what he'd written. "That's manageable," he said. "Sit," Logan said. "It requires some creativity," Iron Bill said. "But yes," he looked up. "You realize you just negotiated on behalf of someone else before you negotiated for yourself." "He needed it more than I needed anything," Logan said. Iron Bill set the pen down and leaned back in his chair and looked at Logan Carter with an expression that was not quite any single thing, not pride, not satisfaction, not the particular gratification of a man who has found exactly what he was looking for, but some combination of all of those worn the way old leather wears things with depth and without display. "I've been doing this for a long time," Iron Bill said. "Building things, finding people, trying to figure out what makes someone worth building around." He was quiet for a moment. "You're the youngest person I've ever had this conversation with." Logan didn't respond to that. "I mean it as an observation," Iron Bill said, "not a compliment." "I know," Logan said. Patricia Carter set down her coffee cup. She had been quiet for the last several minutes, listening with the focused attention that was her signature mode. And when she spoke now, it was with the decisive clarity of a woman who has finished processing something and arrived at a conclusion. "When does it start?" she said. Iron Bill looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, the subtle acknowledgement of one person recognizing another who operates at the same altitude. "Whenever he's ready," Iron Bill said. "He'll need 2 weeks," Patricia said, "to finish the Kenworth." "The truck," Iron Bill said, looking at Logan. "There's a man who needs it back," Logan said simply. "I told him a week and a half. I keep my word." Iron Bill was quiet for a moment. Then he said 2 weeks and extended his hand across the table. Logan shook it. The handshake lasted 3 seconds. It was not ceremonial. It was simply two people sealing something that both of them intended to honor in the uncomplicated way of men who have decided that their word is the document and the document is sufficient. Outside in the workshop, Ray was doing something to a custom frame that produced a sound of metal on metal, precise, rhythmic, purposeful. Jorge was talking to one of the apprentices about something electrical, his voice rising slightly with the specific energy of someone who was about to demonstrate rather than explain. Logan listened to all of it. He thought about the Kenworth. He thought about Pete and Pete's son. He thought about Darnell, who was at this exact moment probably arguing with someone about a billing discrepancy and losing badly because Darnell always lost billing arguments on principle because he had never once charged anyone more than he thought the work was actually worth. He thought about what it meant to be 24 years old and sitting at a table with people who had looked at who he actually was and decided it was worth building around. He didn't have a word for it. He filed it under the category of things that were real and that he would understand better later. And he picked up his coffee cup and he drank the rest of it while it was still warm. The 2 weeks passed the way weeks pass when a man is doing work. He respects on a deadline he intends to keep, not slowly, not quickly, but with a particular fullness of time that is actually being used. Logan finished the Kenworth on a Thursday one day ahead of what he'd told Pete, which was itself one day inside the outer boundary he'd given Iron Bill. He did not rush the last stage to make the timeline. He did not cut anything. He finished it when it was finished, which happened to be Thursday, and he pulled Pete's truck out of the bay and drove it around the block twice to confirm what the instruments were already telling him, which was that it was right. Pete came in that afternoon. He stood beside the truck for a moment without saying anything. Then he got in and started the engine and sat there with his hands on the wheel listening to it. When he got out, his eyes were doing something he was clearly hoping Logan wouldn't notice. "That's my truck," Pete said. "That's exactly my truck." "That's what it's supposed to be," Logan said. Pete put out his hand and Logan shook it. Pete held it a beat longer than a standard handshake, the way men do when the handshake is trying to carry something that words aren't quite getting to. "The kid says thank you," Pete said. "My son, he said to tell you." "He doesn't need to thank me," Logan said. "Tell him to thank the truck for not being past saving." Pete laughed. He paid the invoice, which was exactly what Darnell had quoted, and not a dollar more, and he drove the Kenworth out of the bay with the careful reverence of a man reunited with something he'd been afraid of losing. Darnell watched him go from the doorway. "Good work," Darnell said. "It was a good truck," Logan said. "Logan?" Darnell turned. His voice had a register Logan recognized, the one Darnell used when he was about to say something he'd been holding. "I know about the deal, what you asked Iron Bill for. Chris told me." Logan was quiet. "You didn't have to do that," Darnell said. "I know," Logan said. "I'm serious. You had something on the table that was—" "Darnell," Logan said, "you gave me a chance when I was 19 years old and had nothing except a list of engines I'd worked on and a handshake. You never once made me feel like I owed you, which is the only reason I'll never stop feeling like I do." He paused. "I wasn't going to take something good and leave you out of it. That's not how I work." Darnell was quiet for a moment. He looked at the now empty bay where the Kenworth had been. "The partnership they're offering," Darnell said. "The referral structure. Chris walked me through it yesterday." "And it's good," Darnell said. "It's genuinely good. Better than what I could have put together on my own." He paused. "Iron Bill said you negotiated it before you negotiated your own terms." "I didn't negotiate anything," Logan said. "I just told him what you needed." Darnell looked at him for a long moment. He had the expression of a man who has employed a lot of people over a lot of years and has learned through that experience to be careful about how much he lets himself feel about any of them, because the feeling costs something when they eventually leave. Logan had worked for him for 5 years, and for 5 years, Darnell had maintained the practical distance that good employers maintain, and standing in the bay doorway on a Thursday afternoon, watching a 24-year-old mechanic deflect credit with the same ease. He deflected everything else. That distance was doing something complicated. "Your last day is Monday," Darnell said. "Yeah," Logan said. "Come back and visit." "I will," Logan said. "I mean it. Don't be one of those people who says they'll come back and then—" "Darnell," Logan said. "I will come back." Darnell nodded. He went back inside. Logan heard him 30 seconds later beginning to argue with someone on the phone about a parts order, his voice rising into the particular register it always hit when he was performing irritation while being privately fine with the situation. Logan stood in the bay for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket and his keys in his bag, and he walked out of Darnell's Auto and Diesel for the last time as an employee, and he did not look back. Not because he wasn't grateful, but because looking back was not the direction he was heading. Monday arrived with a particular quality of mornings that announced themselves as different before anything has actually happened yet. Logan was up at 5:45, which was earlier than he needed to be because he had slept poorly, not from anxiety, but from the specific restlessness of a mind that has identified the significance of what is about to occur and cannot be convinced to treat it as ordinary. He ate breakfast with his mother. She was already at the kitchen table when he came out, which meant she had also slept poorly and was not going to admit it. "You're up early," he said. "I'm always up early," she said, which was not entirely true but was not entirely false either, and they both let it stand. He sat across from her. She pushed a plate toward him. Eggs toast, the same breakfast she had made him on every significant morning of his life, going back to as far as he could remember, the first day of school and the first day of his job at Darnell's, and the morning after his father left, which had been the hardest morning of them all, in which she had met with the same plate in the same quality of steady presence. You nervous? She said. No, he said. Then a little. Good, she said. Means you're taking it seriously. He ate. She had coffee. Outside, the city was doing what it always did in the early morning, coming to life in increments, the sound of it building from quiet to ordinary, with the gradual reliability of something that has been doing this every day for decades and sees no reason to stop. Mom, he said, what, the medical thing, the foundation, I want you to call them this week. Patricia was quiet. I know you don't like, he started. I know what I don't like, she said. And I know when I'm being stubborn about something for reasons that stopped making sense. She looked at him. I'll call. This week, he said. This week, she said. Now eat your eggs before they're cold. He finished breakfast. He kissed the top of her head. He picked up his bag and his jacket clean, pressed the good one, and he went to the workshop. Ray was already there when Logan arrived. Ray was Logan would come to understand, always already there. He arrived at 6:30 every morning, regardless of what the day held, because 30 years of working with metal had built in him the conviction that the day didn't begin until you began it yourself, and you couldn't begin it from bed. Ray was 62 years old. He was built like someone who had spent 62 years doing physical work, which he had. He had the hands of a man who had worked with hot metal for decades, scarred in specific places, enormously strong, capable of tolerating temperatures and pressures that would have sent most people reaching for a towel. He had been, for the first 20 years of his career, a production welder in a manufacturing facility in Detroit, and for the last decade he had done exclusively custom motorcycle fabrication, which was a step down in volume and a significant step up in everything else. He looked Logan over when Logan walked in. Not critically, more the way an experienced craftsman looks at a new piece of material, gauging weight grain, where the strength was and where it wasn't. You know, frame geometry, Ray said. No preamble, no welcome. Basics, Logan said. Mostly automotive. Some heavy truck. Different, Ray said. I know, Logan said. What do you know about rake and trail? Logan told him. He was precise, and he did not overclaim, which Ray noted in the particular way that masters of a craft note. When someone understands the limit of their own knowledge with a fractional relaxation, a very slight recalibration of whatever posture they'd held when the conversation began. You can weld, Ray said. Yes. Show me. Logan showed him. Ray watched without speaking. When Logan finished, he looked at the weld for about 15 seconds. Then he said, Your angle's a half degree off on the start pass. He wasn't unkind about it. He was simply precise. I see it, Logan said. You see it now, Ray said. You'll catch it before it happens by the end of the month. That was the entirety of the welcome. They went to work. What Logan discovered in the first 3 days was that custom motorcycle fabrication operated by a set of principles that were both utterly foreign to what he'd spent 5 years doing and completely recognizable in their underlying logic. The tolerance for error was different, tighter in some ways, more philosophical in others, governed by an aesthetic intelligence that automotive work generally didn't require. A truck engine either worked or it didn't. A custom frame worked, but it also had to be exactly what it was intended to be, which was a different category of correctness and one that required a different muscle. He loved it immediately, not with the excitement of someone discovering something new, but with the settled recognition of someone who has found the more precise version of the language they were already speaking. Ray saw this. He said nothing about it for 4 days. On the 5th day, he said during a break without looking up from the piece he was working, You're going to be good at this. I'm not there yet, Logan said. No, Ray said. That's why I said going to be. He looked up then. You know what the difference is between a mechanic and a fabricator? Tell me, Logan said. A mechanic restores what was, Ray said. A fabricator decides what will be. You've been a mechanic your whole life, a good one. Now you have to learn to think forward instead of backward. He paused. The other part, the character part, the part Iron Bill brought you in for that you already have. You can't teach that. The fabrication I can teach. Logan held that. How long, he said. For you, Ray looked at him steadily. 18 months before you're building independently. 12 before you're teaching the fundamentals alongside me. He paused. 8 before you're useful enough that I'll stop being annoyed when you ask questions. It's been 5 days, Logan said. Are you already annoyed? Mildly, Ray said. You ask good questions. It's irritating. Logan almost smiled. Why irritating? Because good questions mean I have to think, Ray said. I've been doing this 30 years. I don't like thinking during fabrication. I like doing. He went back to his work. Ask them anyway. The apprentices came in on Wednesdays and Saturdays. There were 11 of them in the current cohort, ages ranging from 17 to 26. Backgrounds that were, without exception, some variation on the same essential story, people who had capacity and no channel for it, people who had been told in various ways by various institutions that they were not the right fit for the futures. Those institutions were selling people who had arrived at the workshop through a referral or a recommendation, or in 2 cases, a direct intervention by someone in the club who had seen something worth salvaging. Logan sat in on the Wednesday session, his first week, without being introduced as anything in particular. Iron Bill had suggested this, and Logan had agreed immediately because the idea of being positioned as an authority before he had done anything to earn it in this specific context was the kind of thing that made him profoundly uncomfortable. He sat in the back. He watched. What he saw was complicated. The technical instruction was solid. Ray ran that portion with the same directness and precision he applied to everything, and the apprentices who were ready for it absorbed it well. But there was a gap. Not in the curriculum. In the connective tissue, the thing that was supposed to make the skill mean something, that was supposed to show the apprentices not just how to do the work, but why the work mattered and what it required of the person doing it. Iron Bill had known the gap was there. That was what he'd meant in the back office when he said he needed someone to teach the part that couldn't be certified. After the session, most of the apprentices left. 2 stayed behind, a 17-year-old named Dominic and a 22-year-old named Aaron, to ask Ray additional questions about the frame geometry they'd covered that afternoon. Logan stayed too, not conspicuously, just present. Aaron was the one Logan had been watching during the session. He was technically capable, probably the strongest in the cohort, but he held himself with the specific wariness of someone who has learned through experience to distrust situations that appear to be offering him something. Logan recognized that posture. He had worn it himself at 17, 18, 19. It was the posture of someone who has been let down enough times that the prospect of not being let down produces as much anxiety as the letting down itself. After Ray finished answering Dominic's question, Aaron said something. It was quiet enough that Logan almost missed it. What's the point of the precision? Aaron said. Like nobody's going to know if it's a ½ millimeter off. The customer won't know, so why does it matter? Ray looked at him. Because you'll know, Ray said. Yeah, but there's no but, Ray said. Either the standard is the standard or it isn't. The moment you decide the customer won't notice is the moment you've stopped working for the standard and started working against yourself. He paused. Ask me that question again in 3 years. You'll have a different answer. Aaron nodded, but the nod had the quality of someone filing something under things I'll believe. When I see evidence which was not stubbornness, but was the reasonable skepticism of a young man who had been given reasons before that didn't hold up. Logan thought about it on the drive home. He thought about Pete's son, who wanted to be the kind of person who didn't stand still. He thought about Aaron, who was technically excellent and had a guard up for reasons that were legitimate and that no amount of good instruction was going to address on its own. He thought about what Iron Bill had said, that the program was missing someone to teach the part that couldn't be certified. He was beginning to understand in a practical rather than theoretical sense what that meant. 3 weeks into the new role, something happened that none of them had anticipated. The original footage, the 31-second clip from the alley, had continued to circulate in the way that certain pieces of internet content circulate beyond the initial wave, kept alive not by algorithm, but by the specific quality of personal relevance. People kept sending it to other people. Teachers were showing it in classrooms. A veterans organization in Ohio had used it as part of a presentation on community values. A community college in Georgia had reportedly begun discussing it in a sociology course on collective action. None of this was the thing that happened. What happened was a letter. It arrived at the workshop on a Thursday morning, physically an actual paper letter, in an actual envelope addressed to Logan Carter, care of the foundation, written on the letterhead of a middle school in Tucson, Arizona, by a 12-year-old girl named Maya Chen. Iron Bill's assistant, a woman named Denise, who had been managing the foundation's correspondence for 7 years, and was by nature unflappable, brought it to Iron Bill because she didn't know what else to do with it. Iron Bill read it twice. Then he walked it to the workshop and handed it to Logan without saying anything. Logan read it. Maya Chen was 12 years old. Her father had died 18 months ago, a construction accident, the letter said, written with the careful, factual precision of a child who has learned to handle painful information by reporting it accurately. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Maya was, by her own account, struggling in school, not because she didn't understand the material, but because she had stopped believing that understanding the material led anywhere she could actually get to. She had seen the alley video. She had watched it 6 times. She had shown it to her mother, and her mother had cried, and Maya had not understood why until she thought about it for a week and then written this letter. She was not asking for anything. That was the thing that hit Logan first and hardest. She was not asking for money or attention or a response. She said explicitly, near the end of the letter, "I don't need anything. I just wanted you to know that watching you made me believe that people who do the right thing exist in real life, and not just in books. My dad used to be that person for me. Now I look for it in other places." Logan read the letter twice. Then he folded it and held it in his hands for a moment. "How many of these is she getting?" Logan said, looking up at Iron Bill. "Letters," Iron Bill said. "That's the first physical one. The Foundation's email has been running about 60 messages a day since the ceremony. Most are general, some are like this." "Like this," Logan said. "Personal," Iron Bill said. "People who are trying to tell you something specific." Logan was quiet. "You don't have to respond to all of them," Iron Bill said. "Or any of them. That's not—" "I want to respond to this one," Logan said. Iron Bill nodded. "And I want to visit," Logan said. "The school, if they'll have me." Iron Bill was quiet for a moment. "You understand what you're doing." "I'm going to visit a school," Logan said. "You're making yourself available," Iron Bill said. "Once you do that—" "Once I do that, I do it consistently or not at all," Logan said. "I know, I'm not interested in doing it once for the attention." "There'll be more letters," Iron Bill said. More requests." "Then we should probably figure out a structure for it," Logan said, "so it can be done right." He looked at Iron Bill. "Is that something the Foundation can build?" Iron Bill looked at him for a long time. "Yeah," he said, "that's something the Foundation can build." "Good," Logan said. "I'll write to Maya first. Then we'll figure out the rest." He sat down at the work table in the back of the workshop, Ray's table, which Ray had vacated for the moment, and he took out a piece of paper and a pen because the letter had been handwritten, and Logan was not willing to respond to a handwritten letter from a 12-year-old girl with a typed email. He sat there for a few minutes, then he wrote. He wrote the way he did everything, without performance, without distance, with the directness of someone who had decided that what the situation required was honesty, and that honesty was the thing he was most capable of offering. He wrote about what he'd felt in the alley. He wrote that the 6 seconds had not been a decision so much as the absence of the decision not to act, which was different. He wrote that his own father had left when he was 8, and that he had found the people who showed him what character looked like in other places. A mother who never stopped a boss, who never doubted him, eventually strangers who had done the right thing in front of him when they didn't have to. He wrote that the searching for those people was not a sign that something was wrong. It was a sign that you already understood something important about what life requires. He wrote, "Your dad's not gone from you the way you think. The things he taught you are still running. You're using them right now in this letter, whether you know it or not." He folded the letter, he addressed the envelope, he gave it to Denise to mail. Then he went back to the bay, where Ray was waiting with a new frame jig and the patient expression of a man who has learned that the world has its crises and the work has its schedule, and both things are true at the same time. "You done," Ray said. "Done," Logan said. "Good," Ray said, "because your angle on the start pass has been off for 3 days and we're going to fix it today." The visit to Maya's school happened 3 weeks later. Iron Bill came with him. Denise had arranged it through the school's principal, and the principal, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who had the organized decisiveness of someone who ran a building full of adolescents and had long since stopped being surprised by anything, had been straightforwardly practical about it. 1 session, 45 minutes, 8th grade class, no media. Logan had agreed to every term before she'd finished offering them. He was not nervous about the speaking. He was, if anything, more comfortable in rooms full of people who needed something real than in rooms full of people who were being polite. What he was thinking about on the drive down was Aaron. Aaron had been at the workshop every Saturday, His technical work had continued to be strong. But the guard was still there, not as high as it had been maybe, but present. And Logan had been thinking about the specific kind of evidence that moved it in people like Aaron, which was not words or inspiration, but the observation of consistency. You didn't lower your guard because someone said the right things. You lowered it because you watched someone over time and what they said matched what they did, and the match was reliable enough that you stopped expecting the break. That took time. Logan understood he was 3 weeks into it with Aaron, which was not enough time. He was thinking about this because he wanted to understand what he was building, not just respond to individual moments of it. Iron Bill drove. He was quiet most of the way, which Logan had come to recognize as his operating mode during the mile before something significant, not anxiety, just the particular focus of a man who believes in preparing rather than reacting. "What are you going to say to them?" Iron Bill said. "I don't know yet," Logan said. "That's going to make a lot of people nervous," Iron Bill said. "Good," Logan said. "It should be a real conversation, not a speech." Iron Bill glanced at him. "You know, there's going to be a moment in that room when you could say the easy thing or the true thing." "Yeah," Logan said. "They're not always the same." "They almost never are," Logan said. "That's the whole point." Iron Bill said nothing. He seemed satisfied. The room had 32 eighth graders in it when Logan walked in, and the specific quality of silence that descended was not the silence of respect, but of assessment, the way young people go quiet when they are deciding what they think about someone before that person has had a chance to tell them what to think. Logan stood in the front of the room without the podium. He didn't want the podium. "My name is Logan Carter," he said. "I'm a mechanic. I'm 24. I don't have a speech prepared, which probably violates some school rules somewhere, so I apologize to Dr. Reyes in advance." Someone laughed. It broke something loose in the room. "I'm here because one of you wrote me a letter," Logan said, "and I'm not going to embarrass that person by pointing them out. But I want them to know that the letter was the reason I asked to come, and that I read it 3 times, and that it made me think harder about some things than most of what I've read in the last year." He paused. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want a real answer, not the one you think I'm looking for. How many of you have seen something wrong happening and done nothing about it?" Silence. Then slowly hands went up. First 3, then more, then most of the room. "Me too," Logan said. "Every hand I see up is also my hand." He let that sit. The difference between that and what happened in that alley is not that I'm a different kind of person. It's that I spent years practicing the decision before I had to make it. He paused again. You don't get to practice courage in the moment. You practice it before the moment in small things every day. What you do when you see someone getting excluded at lunch. What you say when someone says something cruel about someone who isn't there to hear it. What you do when you find something that belongs to someone else and no one would know if you kept it. He looked around the room. Those are the moments, not the alleys. The alleys are just where you find out what your practice has built. The room was very quiet. A hand went up. A boy in the back, slightly built, with the specific expression of someone who has a question they're genuinely afraid to ask. "Yeah," Logan said. "What if you practice," the boy said, "and you still freeze? What if you do all of it, and then the moment comes and you still can't?" Logan looked at him directly. "Then you don't freeze the next time," Logan said. "That's all. You use the freeze as information. You ask yourself what the freeze was protecting you from. Usually it's not the danger, it's the embarrassment. Once you identify it, you practice past that specific edge." He paused. "Freezing once doesn't disqualify you. Walking away and deciding it always happens to other people, that's the thing to be afraid of." The boy nodded, slowly. The specific nod of someone who is genuinely receiving something rather than performing reception. Logan looked at the room. Somewhere in the third row, he could see a girl who was not looking at him. She was looking at her desk. Her hands were folded in front of her, and she had the stillness of someone who is trying to stay composed. He didn't point at her. He didn't change what he was doing, but he directed the next thing he said in a slightly different direction, not at her, but towards something she could receive without being singled out. "One more thing," he said, "and then I'll take every question you have." He looked at the room. Losing someone who was your person, the one who showed you what right looks like, that's the hardest thing. And nobody is going to tell you it isn't because it is. He paused. But I need you to know something. I wish someone had told me earlier. That person didn't just love you, they also taught you. And everything they taught you is still in you running whether you feel it or not. You're not starting over when you lose them. You're carrying forward. He stopped. That's not a consolation, it's a fact. The girl in the third row was not looking at her desk anymore. She was looking at him. Her eyes were bright in the way of someone who is fighting tears and winning barely, and who has decided the fight is worth making. Logan held her gaze for exactly as long as it took to make sure she knew the thing had landed. Then he said, "Okay, questions." The room erupted. He answered every question. He stayed 12 minutes over the 45. Dr. Reyes did not stop him. Iron Bill stood at the back of the room the entire time with his arms crossed and an expression on his face that the students probably read as stern, but that Logan, glancing back, once recognized as something entirely different. It was the expression Iron Bill had worn in the alley the night it all began. The one that lived beneath the surface of his face like a thought he hadn't finished yet. Except now it looked finished. So, in the parking lot afterward, Iron Bill said nothing for a full minute. They were at the car. The school was behind them. The afternoon had the specific quality of late fall in Arizona dry heat holding on past its welcome, the light doing something complicated at this hour. "You've done that before," Iron Bill said. It was not a question. "No," Logan said. "It felt like before," Iron Bill said. "It felt like every other conversation I've had with someone who needed something real," Logan said. "That's the same? The room is different." Iron Bill was quiet. "The girl in the third row," Logan said. "Maya," Iron Bill said. Logan had assumed. He nodded. "She didn't come to the front after," Iron Bill said. "I know," Logan said. "She didn't need to." Iron Bill looked at him. "She already had what she came for," Logan said. "She needed to know it landed. It landed." He paused. "She'll come to the front when she's ready. Probably not today. Maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in 6 months. But she's not the same as she was when she walked in." Iron Bill was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had a register Logan hadn't heard from him before. Not softer exactly, but stripped of the professional precision that was its usual characteristic. Something more immediate underneath it. "I built this program 11 years ago," Iron Bill said. "I built it because I watched young people fall through every gap the system had, and I decided I could do something about that. And I could, and I did. And it works." He paused. "But I've been watching you for 6 weeks, and I want to tell you something." He paused again. He was choosing his words the way a man chooses them when he knows they'll matter. "I didn't build this program for the program. I built it for the specific thing that happened in that room today. That's what it was always supposed to be. I just didn't have the person for it until now." Logan didn't respond immediately. He thought about Aaron and the guard that needed time. He thought about Ray and the start pass that was a half-degree right off and wouldn't be by the end of the month. He thought about Darnell arguing with someone on the phone about a billing discrepancy and always losing because he never charged more than the work was worth. He thought about his mother calling the foundation this week, which she had promised, and which she would do, because Patricia Carter kept her promises even when they cost her the particular pride of not needing anyone. He thought about a 12-year-old girl looking up from her desk with bright eyes and deciding the fight was worth making. "I know what it was always supposed to be," Logan said. "I could tell when you described it." He looked at Iron Bill. "That's why I said yes." Iron Bill nodded. They got in the car. The drive back to Phoenix took 43 minutes, and they spent most of it in the comfortable silence of two people who have said what needed to be said and have, for now, nothing left to add. The drive back from Tucson settled into something Logan didn't have a clean word for. Not contentment, not satisfaction, something quieter than both the particular internal steadiness of a man who has done a thing that was true and is now simply living in the aftermath of it without needing it to be more than what it was. Iron Bill dropped him at the workshop. It was past 6. Ray had locked up the bays but left the side door open, which was Ray's way of communicating that he knew Logan would come back and that this was acceptable. Logan went inside not to work. The light was wrong, and he was tired in the deep way that comes from spending yourself fully in a room full of people who needed something real, but to be in the space. He sat on the stool at Ray's work table and looked at the frame they'd been building together that week, the one that was slowly becoming something recognizable, and he thought about Aaron. He had been thinking about Aaron for 3 weeks. Not with concern exactly, with the patience of someone who understands that certain things cannot be forced and that the attempt to force them produces the opposite of the intended result. Aaron came every Saturday. He worked with precision and without complaint. He asked good questions, technical ones, specific ones, the kind that came from someone who was genuinely trying to understand rather than performing engagement. But there was a wall, and Logan knew what was on the other side of it because he had stood on that side himself for years. And he knew that the wall didn't come down because someone knocked on it. It came down when the person inside decided the ground outside was solid enough to stand on. He was still sitting there when his phone buzzed. Marcus, his former coworker from Darnell's, who texted with the frequency and unpredictability of someone who had a lot of thoughts and no particular filter on which ones made it to the send button. The text said, "Dude, have you seen this?" Below it a link. Logan looked at it for a moment, then he opened it. It was an article, not from a local outlet, from a national one, the kind that had a readership in the millions, and a comments section that was its own civilization. The headline was about Logan and the ceremony and Iron Bill's speech, but it was not the ceremony coverage that had been running for the past several weeks. It was something different, an analysis piece. Someone had done research, real research, the kind that involved talking to people, cross-referencing records, building a picture from sources. They had found Mrs. Vasquez. They had found Dolores and George. They had found Open Road Foundation in the payroll deduction records and 2 other instances of what the article described in a phrase that Logan read twice and found deeply uncomfortable as a pattern of anonymous generosity spanning more than 6 years. The article was not inaccurate. That was the first thing Logan established reading it with the same systematic attention he gave to diagnostic readouts. Everything in it was factually correct. The quotes from people who knew him were real quotes. The records were real records. It was not inaccurate, it was just public, in a way that went several layers deeper than the ceremony had gone. The ceremony had been about 6 seconds in an alley. This was about the entire architecture of a life. He put his phone down. He picked it up again and called his mother. She answered on the second ring. "I know," she said, before he said anything. "I've already read it." "How?" Logan said. "Mrs. Vasquez called me an hour ago," Patricia said. "She wanted to warn me. She said someone had spoken with her and she hadn't known it would end up in an article, and she was sorry." "It's not her fault," Logan said. "I told her that," Patricia said. "Are you okay?" Logan said. There was a pause. His mother was doing the thing she did when she was deciding how much of what she actually felt to give him. "It's strange," she said finally, "reading it, seeing your life described by someone who never met you, who got it mostly right, which is almost worse than if they'd gotten it wrong, because there's nothing to correct." "Mom, I'm okay," she said. "I'm not fragile, Logan. You know that." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I don't love it," he said. "No," she said. "You wouldn't." "The foundation's going to get more requests," he said. "This is going to—" He stopped. He was working through it in real time the way he worked through complex diagnostics sequentially without skipping steps. "It's going to change the scope of things, what we're trying to build. I need to talk to Iron Bill." "In the morning," Patricia said. "Tonight you come home and eat dinner." "I'm at the workshop." "I know where you are," she said. "I said come home." He came home. No. Iron Bill had also read the article by the time Logan reached him the next morning. He had, as was his way, already begun responding to it, not publicly, not with a statement, but with the practical action of someone who identifies a change variable and immediately starts calculating its implications. They sat in the back office. Denise had brought coffee. She had also, Logan noticed, brought a second legal pad, which meant Iron Bill was expecting this conversation to produce things that needed to be written down. "You saw the numbers," Iron Bill said. "I saw the article," Logan said. "What numbers?" "Foundation inbox," Iron Bill said. "Since last night." He looked at the legal pad. 412 messages. 7 school districts requesting visits. 3 veteran organizations in different states. A community college in New Mexico asking about a partnership. 2 members of Congress, staff, not the members themselves, but still asking for information about the program model. Logan was quiet. "And that's in 14 hours, Iron Bill said. "What are you thinking?" Logan said. "I'm thinking we're at an inflection point," Iron Bill said. And inflection points don't wait for you to be ready. Logan looked at him. What does that mean practically? Iron Bill put down the legal pad. He leaned forward in his chair. He had the quality in moments like this of someone who has spent 40 years making decisions under pressure and has learned the specific discipline of distinguishing between what feels urgent and what actually is. It means the thing you built in that room in Tucson, the visit, the conversation, the real engagement that has to become a structure, Iron Bill said. Not because I want to expand for expansion's sake, because the need is real and we now have the visibility to meet it. And if we don't build a structure quickly and correctly, it becomes something we didn't intend. You've been thinking about this since before the article, Logan said. It wasn't an accusation, it was an observation. Iron Bill looked at him steadily. Yes, he said. How long? Since the workshop meeting, Iron Bill said. When you asked about the school visit, I saw the shape of what you were thinking, and I started working on the infrastructure behind it. Logan absorbed this. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet when something genuinely surprised him, briefly, cleanly, and then gone, replaced by the practical engagement with whatever the thing was. Show me, Logan said. Iron Bill showed him. What he had been developing with Denise, and with the Foundation's attorney, and with a man named Richard, who handled the club's charitable operations across multiple chapters, was a framework for what he was calling, in the working documents, a national mentorship initiative. The model was built around 3 components: skilled trades apprenticeships, through partner shops of which Darnell's was intended to be the first. Community visits of the kind Logan had done in Tucson, structured and repeated rather than one-off, and what the documents described as peer accountability networks. Small groups of young people in the program connected with veterans, retired tradespeople, and others who could provide the long-term consistency that a single visit could spark but not sustain. It was serious work. Months of it organized with the precision of someone who understood that good intentions without structure produce enthusiasm that burns out quickly and leaves the people it was supposed to serve in worse shape than before. Logan read through it carefully. He asked questions, good ones, specific ones, the same quality of questions he asked Ray about frame geometry, which was to say the kind that identified load-bearing problems before they became failures. The peer networks, Logan said. Who maintains them? Who checks in? Who notices when someone's falling away before they've actually gone? That's the gap we haven't solved, Iron Bill said. It has to be someone inside the program, Logan said. Not an administrator. Someone the kids trust because they've seen them do the work. He paused. Aaron. Iron Bill looked at him. Aaron's been in the program 4 months, Logan said. He's technically the strongest in the cohort. He's also the one who most needs to see himself as someone capable of holding something up rather than someone being held up. He paused. If you put him in a peer leadership role, structured, supported, not thrown in, without preparation, he either rises to it or he tells you exactly where the gap in his readiness is. Either outcome is useful. That's a risk, Iron Bill said. Every useful thing is a risk, Logan said. The question is whether it's a smart one. Iron Bill was quiet for a long moment. You've been thinking about him since before today, Iron Bill said. Since the second Wednesday, Logan said. Iron Bill picked up the pen. He wrote something on the legal pad. Talk to Ray first, he said. If Ray signs off on the technical side that Aaron's ready to be in a leading position without it hurting his own development, then we pilot it. Ray will sign off, Logan said. You sound certain. Ray told me last week that Aaron's angle correction is the fastest he's seen in 30 years of teaching, Logan said. He hasn't told Aaron that yet because he doesn't want him to stop paying attention to the correction. But he'll tell me when I ask. Iron Bill set the pen down. He looked at Logan across the table with an expression that was not quite any single thing, in which Logan had stopped trying to categorize because it was the expression Iron Bill wore when something was matching an expectation he had had for a long time, and the specifics of it were private. One more thing, Logan said. What? The visit model, Logan said. Tucson was 45 minutes, one session. Dr. Reyes was practical about it. No media-defined scope, clear boundaries. He paused. That's the right template, okay. Not longer, not more open-ended, because the value isn't in the length. The value is in the quality of the engagement, and quality degrades with length when you're talking to young people who have been trained to expect content that doesn't hold them. You learned that in one visit, Iron Bill said. I learned it in the first 10 minutes, Logan said. After that, I was just confirming it. Iron Bill looked at him. Then he did something he rarely did in working context. He smiled. Not broadly. It was Iron Bill's version of a smile, which was a slight shift in the architecture of his face that if you didn't know what you were looking at, you might miss. We're building something real, Iron Bill said. I know, Logan said. You're not uncomfortable with that anymore, Iron Bill said. The scope of it. Logan thought about it honestly. I'm not comfortable with the attention, he said. I don't think I'll ever be comfortable with the attention. But the work, he paused, the work I can do all day. That's the right answer, Iron Bill said. Down you shot. Logan talked to Ray that afternoon. Ray's response to the Aaron proposal was precisely what Logan had anticipated delivered in precisely the way Ray delivered everything without excess, without padding, with the clean economy of a man who considers his words to be load-bearing and treats them accordingly. Technically ready, Ray said, temperamentally. He stopped. He looked at the frame they were working on together. You know what happens when a material is almost ready for stress, but not quite, it holds under moderate load, Logan said, fails at the edge cases. Right, Ray said. Aaron's almost ready. The question is whether the pier roll is moderate load or edge case. Structured correctly moderate, Logan said. Thrown in unsupported edge case. Then structure it correctly, Ray said. He went back to the frame. Tell him about the angle correction, he should know. I thought you were holding that. I was, Ray said. But if you're asking him to step up, you give him the full picture of where he stands first. Otherwise, he's making a decision without complete information. He paused. That's not fair. Logan looked at Ray. What? Ray said. Nothing. Logan said. Just you're right. I'm usually right, Ray said. That's why I've been doing this 30 years. Aaron came in the following Saturday. The session was standard for the first 2 hours. Technical work. Ray's instruction the apprentices working through a new phase of the curriculum. Logan assisted, observed, corrected where correction was needed. He had found a rhythm with the group that was not a teacher's rhythm and not a peer's rhythm, but something between them, a register that the apprentices seemed to respond to without being able to name what it was. After the main session, when the others had begun wrapping up, Logan said, Aaron, stay a few minutes. Aaron looked up. The guard went up with his eyes fast, reflexive, the specific vigilance of someone who has learned that being asked to stay behind is rarely good news. Nothing's wrong, Logan said immediately, because he had been watching Aaron long enough to know that the reassurance needed to come first. Aaron stayed. They sat at the sided table. Logan got 2 cups of coffee from the machine in the corner, the machine that made coffee of genuinely poor quality and that everyone drank anyway because the workshop was cold in the mornings and the coffee was hot. Aaron wrapped both hands around the cup. He was still watching Logan with the careful attention of someone who hasn't decided yet whether to trust the situation. Ray wanted me to tell you something, Logan said. That surprised Aaron. He hadn't expected Ray's name. He said your angle correction is the fastest development he's seen in 30 years of teaching, Logan said. He's been holding it because he didn't want you to stop paying attention to the correction. But he said it's your information and you should have it. Aaron was very still. Okay, he said, carefully. He doesn't say things like that, Logan said. I know, Aaron said. So you know what it means, Logan said. Aaron looked at his coffee cup. Something was happening in his face, a quiet internal thing that someone less attentive than Logan might have missed. It was not pride. It was more complicated than pride. It was the specific expression of someone who has been carrying a private belief that they might be capable of something good and who has just received the first external confirmation that the belief was not wishful thinking. Logan let it have its moment. Then he said, I want to talk to you about something else. Iron Bill is building an expansion of the program. Peer networks, small groups of people in the program connected with someone a few steps ahead of them. Someone who's doing the work and can show what it looks like from the inside. He paused. I want to offer you that role. Silence. I'm 4 months in, Aaron said. I know, Logan said. There are people in the cohort who've been here longer. I know that too, Logan said. Length isn't the variable I'm measuring. Aaron looked at him directly for the first time in the conversation. What variable are you measuring? Whether you understand what the program is actually for, Logan said, not the certification, not the technical skill, what it's for underneath both of those things. Aaron was quiet. You asked Ray why the precision mattered if no one would notice, Logan said. You remember. Yeah, Aaron said, slightly guarded as if this might be where the thing turned critical. That was the right question, Logan said. Most people don't ask it. Most people just do the work or don't do it, and they never actually interrogate why the standard is the standard. He paused. Ray gave you the short answer. I want to give you the longer one. Aaron waited. The reason the precision matters, Logan said, is that the habit of precision is what you carry out of the workshop into everything else. The half millimeter is not about the bike. The half millimeter is about what kind of person you decide to be when no one's checking. That decision made consistently over years is the thing that makes the difference between a life that holds and a life that doesn't. He looked at Aaron directly. You already understand that. You asked the question because you were testing the answer, checking whether the people running this program actually know what they're building or whether they're just going through the motions. Aaron said nothing, but the guard came down. Not entirely, not permanently, but enough. The shift was in his posture, in the quality of his attention, something unclenched, something that had been waiting to unclench for months. Why me? Aaron said. Because you're technically ready, Logan said, and because you need to be on the giving side of something before you fully trust that the giving side exists. Aaron looked at him. That's a real reason, Aaron said. Not a question, an observation. I don't give fake reasons, Logan said. Aaron was quiet for a long moment. He turned the coffee cup in his hands, an old habit, the physical loop of someone thinking. I'd need to know exactly what it involves, he said. You will, Logan said. Iron Bill will walk through it with you before anything is formalized. You're not committing to anything in this conversation. I'm asking if you're willing to have the next conversation. Aaron thought about it. Yeah, he said. I'm willing to have it. Logan nodded. He picked up his coffee. One more thing, he said. What? Ray's going to keep being hard on you, Logan said. The leadership role doesn't change that. If anything, it gets harder because now you're responsible for your own standard and also for what the people watching you take from it. Aaron almost smiled. Great, he said. You must. Yeah, Logan said. Welcome to it. The pivot happened fast after that. The way pivots always happen when the groundwork has been properly laid, not gradually but all at once, as if the foundation had been quietly becoming load-bearing while everyone was looking somewhere else, and now it simply was. Within 6 weeks of the national article, the foundation had formalized partnership agreements with 11 shops in 4 states, all referrals from the Darnell model, all vetted through the same framework that Iron Bill had built before the inflection point arrived. The visit program had a schedule, 8 confirmed dates through the following spring. 3 states, a mix of schools and veteran organizations, and 1 community center in Albuquerque that had reached out through a channel that turned out to trace back eventually to a Vietnam veteran who had been in the crowd at the ceremony and who had spent the 6 weeks since quietly advocating for the program to every organization he was connected to. Logan did not track any of this through the media coverage which continued, but which he had developed a relationship with that could best be described as strategic indifference. He tracked it through the work, the apprentices, the visits, the letters which Denise now organized by category and brought to him twice a week because the volume had grown beyond what she could manage through simple chronology. He answered every letter from a young person personally. He was not fast about it. He wrote them by hand, which was slower, but which he maintained because the people writing them had done something effortful and the response should be equally effortful. Denise had initially suggested a template. Logan had listened to the suggestion with full attention and then said respectfully, no, she had not raised it again. The letters from adults, from organizations, from institutions, from the occasional person who wanted to tell him their own story of a moment they were proud of or a moment they weren't, he read, and Denise helped him respond to, which was a compromise he was comfortable with because the purpose those letters served was different and the response they needed was correspondingly different. One morning in his 3rd month at the workshop, Logan arrived at 6:50, 10 minutes after Ray, as had become their habit, a gap that was technically Logan being early by any reasonable measure, but which Ray treated as Logan being slightly late by his own, and found Ray standing at the work table, not working. Ray standing and not working was unusual enough that Logan stopped. "What?" Logan said. Ray turned. He was holding something, a piece of paper printed, which meant Denise had printed it for him, because Ray had strong feelings about printing things, and those feelings were that other people did it. "Read this," Ray said. Logan took the paper. It was an email forwarded through the foundation address from a man named Curtis Webb. Curtis Webb was 67 years old, retired, and had spent 22 years working as a master welder in an aircraft manufacturing facility in Wichita before his hands had started losing the precision necessary for the tolerances his work required, which he described in the email with the specific, unsentimental accuracy of a craftsman reporting on the deterioration of his primary tool. He had read the article. He had seen the coverage. He was not writing for any of the reasons Logan's letters usually came, not to share a story about courage or inspiration or any of the categories the media had built around what Logan had done. He was writing because he had a shop, a small one his own, with equipment that was by his account better than most programs could afford, and which was sitting underused because his hands had stopped working at the level the work required. He had 3 former apprentices, all working tradespeople, all with busy lives, all of whom he believed would volunteer time if asked correctly. He was writing to ask if the foundation wanted his shop as a partner site. Logan read it twice. He looked at Ray. "How many Curtis Webbs are there?" Logan said. "In the country," Ray said. "In the country," Logan said. "Retired master craftsmen with equipment and time and the willingness to use both." Ray thought about it. "A lot," he said. "More than you'd think. And they're not doing anything with it, mostly because nobody's asked correctly. Because the ask has always been about money," Logan said. "Donate to us, fund us, write a check." "And Curtis Webb doesn't want to write a check," Ray said. "Curtis Webb wants to be useful," Logan said. "He wants to do what he does, which is teach people to weld with precision, and he wants to know it matters." Ray was quiet. "That's a different model," Logan said. He was not talking to Ray anymore exactly. He was thinking aloud, and Ray was the right person to think aloud to, because Ray listened the way he fabricated, which was to say with total attention and without rushing to fill the space. It's not a partnership where the foundation provides everything. It's a network, distributed. The master craftsmen provide the space and the expertise. The foundation provides the structure and the selection and the continuity, and the apprentices get both. "You'd need to quality control the sites," Ray said. "Not every retired welder should be teaching." "No," Logan said, "but Curtis Webb is not describing himself the way someone describes themselves when they're unclear on their own limitations. He's describing his hands failing with precision. That's a man who understands standards." Ray looked at him for a moment. "Take it to Iron Bill," Ray said. "I am," Logan said, "but I wanted to tell you first." Ray raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because the fabrication piece is your program," Logan said. "I'm not changing it without you in the room." Ray was quiet for a long moment. He had the expression of someone absorbing something they had not expected without the performance of being moved by it, just absorbing it accurately the way he absorbed everything. "Good," he said. He turned back to the work table. "Now stop standing there and get your angle right on the start pass." Logan went to his station. He thought about Curtis Webb in Wichita with his equipment and his time, and his 3 former apprentices who would volunteer if asked correctly. He thought about how many versions of that existed across the country rooms, full of knowledge that had no structure to move through expertise, with no channel to flow into people who had spent decades building a capacity and who were now in the specific quiet grief of that capacity going unused. He thought about what it meant to build something with enough reach to find those people, to ask correctly, to give them back the thing they'd lost, which was not the physical precision of their hands, but the function of being necessary. He made notes in the small notebook he kept in his chest pocket. Never a phone, always paper, because paper didn't require a signal and didn't run out of battery and couldn't be accidentally wiped. He kept the notes precise and brief because the notebook was a tool, not a journal, and tools should be efficient. He wrote Curtis Webb model, distributed master sites. Foundation equals structure plus selection plus continuity. Site providers equals space plus expertise. Vet the people, not just the equipment. He underlined the last line. Then he went back to the frame and he thought about it while he worked, and the 2 things lived comfortably, alongside each other the way they always had for him. The work and the thinking about the work, neither interrupting the other, both being served by the same discipline. 3 weeks later, Curtis Webb came to Phoenix. He drove 8 hours from Wichita in a truck that was by his own account 21 years old and had more miles on it than his doctor would be comfortable knowing. He arrived on a Tuesday morning and parked in the workshop lot and came inside and shook Logan's hand with a grip that was still whatever the precision had done formidable in the way of old strength that has settled into itself. He was 67, which Logan had known from the email, but which in person translated differently than he'd expected. He was not an old man in the way that implied diminishment. He was a man who had been doing physical work for most of his 67 years and who wore those years the way the best tools wore their use, with depth and integrity, and a few marks that were part of the identity rather than damage to it. He looked at the workshop the way Logan had looked at it on his first day, with the specific, unhurried attention of a craftsman assessing a space. "Good equipment," Curtis said. "Ray's particular about it," Logan said. "As he should be," Curtis said. They sat down with Iron Bill and Ray and Denise, and they talked for 3 hours. Curtis was the kind of man who said what he had come to say without ornamentation and without evasion, and the conversation moved accordingly efficient in the way of meetings between people who are not performing the engagement but actually doing it. By the end of the 3rd hour, Curtis Webb's shop in Wichita was designated as the first distributed site in what Iron Bill's legal pad now described in his careful block printing as the National Trades Network. Curtis shook Iron Bill's hand. He shook Ray's hand. He shook Logan's hand. Then he said to Logan specifically something that Logan had not been expecting and which landed in a place that didn't have a clean name. "I saw the video," Curtis said. The alley, I want to tell you something about it." "Okay," Logan said. "I had a moment," Curtis said. 20 years ago, different alley, different city, different circumstances. I saw something wrong happening, and I stood there." He paused. He said it the way men say the thing they have carried longest, plainly, without drama, because the drama had been burned off by years of carrying it. "I've thought about it every week since then. What I should have done." He looked at Logan. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel like you fixed something for me. I'm telling you because I want you to know why I drove 8 hours. It wasn't because of the program as good as the program is. It was because I saw a 24-year-old kid do the thing I didn't do, and then I saw what he did after, and I thought, he stopped. I thought maybe the way I stop carrying it is to spend the rest of my time building something that makes it less likely someone else ends up carrying it." The room was very quiet. Logan looked at Curtis Webb. He thought about the boy in the back of the classroom in Tucson who had asked what happened if you freeze and you'd practiced and you freeze anyway. He thought about what he'd said, "You don't freeze the next time. You use it as information. You practice past that specific edge." He thought about the fact that Curtis Webb had spent 20 years finding his practice and had driven 8 hours to begin it. "You're not carrying it anymore," Logan said. "You drove 8 hours. You're not carrying it." Curtis was quiet, then he nodded, once. The specific nod of a man who has needed to hear a precise thing and has heard it and is filing it in the place where it belongs. "Good program," Curtis said. He stood up. "I need to drive back tomorrow. Long day." Iron Bill offered him a room for the night through the Foundation's network. Curtis accepted it with the uncomplicated practicality of a man who does not perform independence when practicality is available. After he left the room, Iron Bill looked at Logan. "You knew what he needed to say," Iron Bill said. "I knew he hadn't said it yet," Logan said. "The email had it underneath the surface, something he was carrying." "Most people would have missed it," Iron Bill said. "Most people read emails for the information," Logan said. "I read them for what's underneath the information." Iron Bill was quiet for a moment. "That's not a skill you learned," he said. "No," Logan said. "I've always been able to hear it when someone's saying one thing and meaning another, when there's something underneath." He paused. "My mother calls it my problem. She says it makes me take on things that aren't mine to carry." "Is she right?" Iron Bill said. Logan thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything. "Sometimes," he said, "but less often than she worries about." Iron Bill wrote something on the legal pad. He did not share what it was. Logan did not ask. He went back to the workshop. Ray had left a note on the frame, which was Ray's version of a text message, precise, handwritten, actionable. It said, "Check the lower junction. I think there's a stress point we missed." Logan checked it. Ray was right. There was a stress point they'd missed small, the kind of thing that wouldn't fail under normal load and would fail at the edge case exactly as Ray had described Aaron. He spent the next 2 hours correcting it. He thought about edge cases and low-bearing things and what it meant to build a structure that held not just under the expected weight, but under the weight no one had anticipated yet. He thought about Curtis Webb, who had carried something for 20 years and had driven 8 hours to put it down. He thought about Aaron, who was 3 weeks into a peer role that was by every indication so far, teaching him something that the technical instruction alone had never quite reached. He thought about his mother, who had called the foundation the week after the workshop meeting as promised, and who had met twice now with their medical liaison, and who had said to Logan on the evening after the second meeting, in the particular tone of a woman yielding a position she'd held too long, "They're good people." "I know," Logan had said. "You don't need to look like you knew," she said. "I don't know what my face is doing," he said. "Yes, you do," she said. He did. The frame was right by the time he finished the correction. He ran his hands along it in the way Ray had taught him, not looking for what the eye could catch, but listening through the hands for what the hands knew. There was nothing wrong. The junction held. The stress point was resolved. He stood back. He thought this is what it feels like to build something correctly. Not finished. There were still stages left, still work to do, but correctly. Moving in the right direction. Carrying the right weight. He wrote one more note in the small notebook. It said, "Edge cases are where you find out what the structure is really made of. Build for those first." He underlined it. Then he turned off the light over his station and went home to his mother, who had made dinner and who would not ask him how his day was because she would be able to tell by looking at him, and who would tell him to eat before it got cold, which was what she always said when she meant, "I'm glad you're here and I can see it went well, and I'm not going to make a production of either of those things." He ate before it got cold. The notebook filled up in 8 months. Logan had not intended it to be a measure of anything. It was a tool, the same small black notebook he'd used since he was 19, same brand, same size, same chest, pocket. He went through roughly one every 4 months in ordinary life, diagnostic, notes, parts, references, things to follow up on. At the workshop, with everything the work had expanded to become, he went through it in 8 months, and when he picked up the new one from the supply shelf in Denise's office and looked at the completed one sitting beside it, he held both of them for a moment and thought about what 8 months had actually contained. 14 visits, 6 states, schools, veteran organizations, 2 correctional facility programs that Iron Bill had quietly built relationships with over the previous decade, and which were, Logan had come to understand, some of the most serious work the foundation did, and also some of the least discussed, because the people running those programs had learned that visibility attracted the wrong kind of attention and invisibility protected the work. 41 personal letters answered by hand. 309 foundation emails answered with Denise's help. Curtis Webb's site in Wichita operational now for 6 months with 7 apprentices and 2 of his former students coming in on alternate weekends to assist with instruction. 4 more distributed sites in the network, all modeled on Curtis, all vetted through the same framework, the people first, the equipment second. Aaron had not failed at the edge case. That was the thing Logan thought about most, flipping through the completed notebook before he shelved it. Aaron at 4 months had been a question. Aaron at 8 months was an answer, and the answer was better than Logan had predicted, which was itself the best kind of outcome, the kind where your judgment had been right, but the reality exceeded it. What had happened with Aaron was not dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic. It was the accumulation of small, consistent decisions made over months by a young man who had been given responsibility before he was entirely sure he deserved it, and who had decided privately, and without announcement, that the uncertainty was not a reason to withdraw from the responsibility, but a reason to take it more seriously. He showed up first on Saturdays now. He stayed last. He had taken on 2 of the younger apprentices, a 15-year-old named Darius and a 19-year-old named Shelby, not as a formal mentorship assignment, but as a natural gravitational thing, the way certain people become the center of a group's trust without being appointed to it. Logan had watched it happen and had said nothing about it because Aaron was doing the specific thing that Logan had hoped he might do, and the right response to a person doing the right thing was usually to get out of the way and let them do it. Until the Thursday morning that Aaron appeared at Logan's station before the day had properly started. Logan was reading over the Curtis website's latest progress report. Curtis sent these monthly typed on what Logan suspected was an extremely old word processor, with a precision of detail that made them both useful and genuinely pleasurable to read. Aaron knocked on the door frame of the bay. He did not come in until Logan looked up. "Can I talk to you?" Aaron said. "Yeah," Logan said. "Come in." Aaron came in. He stood at the work table rather than sitting, which Logan had learned was Aaron's posture when something was difficult, the physical readiness of someone who might need to pace and had not yet ruled it out. "Darius," Aaron said. Logan waited. "Something's happening at home," Aaron said. "He hasn't said anything directly, but I've been watching him for 3 weeks and I know the signs." He paused. His jaw was set in the way of someone who is managing the emotion of a situation rather than reporting on it from a distance. "I went through something similar at his age. Different details. Same general the way a 15-year-old holds himself when the thing he's supposed to be able to count on isn't there." Logan set down the report. "What do you need?" Logan said. "I don't know the right way to approach it," Aaron said. "I know I want to. I know I should, but I don't want to." He stopped. He started again. "I don't want to do it wrong. He trusts me. I don't want to make it worse by handling it badly." Logan looked at him. He thought about 6 seconds in an alley. He thought about what he had said to a classroom full of 8th graders about the real decision being made before the moment in the small practices, the daily accumulations. He thought about Aaron at 22 years old, standing in a bay doorway, asking how to do the right thing correctly, which was the single most important question a person could ask about any action that mattered. "You sit beside him," Logan said, "not in front of him. Beside. You're not his authority and you're not his therapist. You're the person who noticed and didn't pretend he didn't notice." Aaron listened. "You don't ask him to tell you what's wrong," Logan said. "You tell him what you observed, specifically. Not 'are you okay?' That question gives people the exit of fine. You say what you saw. You say, 'I noticed you've been quieter the last few weeks. I noticed you are getting here earlier and leaving later. I don't need you to explain it. I just want you to know I see it." He paused. "And then you stop talking." "That's it," Aaron said. "The stopping talking is the hardest part," Logan said. "Most people fill the silence because it makes them uncomfortable. The silence is where the other person decides whether it's safe to be real. You have to let it live." Aaron absorbed this. He was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet when something had landed accurately, not acknowledgement but absorption. "What if he doesn't say anything?" Aaron said. "Then you say I'm here, and you mean it. And the next Saturday he comes in, you're still there, and you still mean it, and the Saturday after that." Logan looked at him directly. "The message isn't delivered in one conversation. It's delivered by not going anywhere." Aaron nodded slowly. "And Aaron," Logan said. "Yeah." "You already know how to do this," Logan said. "You're here because you needed to hear someone tell you that you know, not because you needed the instructions." Aaron was very still for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah," in a register that was quieter and more real than the one he'd been using, the specific register of someone who has released something they were holding. He left. Logan picked up the Curtis Webb report and then set it down again. He sat at the work table for a moment. He thought about Iron Bill saying finding someone who has the skill and the character to teach both of those things at once. He thought about what Ray had said, the fabrication I can teach. He thought about what he had told Aaron and recognized in the telling the voice of every person who had sat beside him rather than in front of him at the moments when he needed it most. His mother, Darnell, Iron Bill in the alley asking what his name was and filing it with the expression of a man who knew exactly what he was going to do with it. The teaching was not separate from the being taught. It was the same movement, continuous passing forward. He went back to work. Darius came to Aaron the following Saturday. Logan only knew this because Aaron told him afterward, standing in the lot after everyone had gone, in the particular way of someone who needs to debrief something that has been significant and doesn't have many people who would understand the specific nature of the significance. He talked for 40 minutes, Aaron said. He was not performing composure. He was exercising it, which was different. "I said what you said. I told him what I'd observed. I stopped talking." He paused. He started at his stepfather and then went back further and then went to things I didn't expect him to trust me with yet. "How'd you handle it?" Logan said. "I listened," Aaron said. "I didn't fix anything. There wasn't anything to fix in that conversation. He stopped. I was there. That's the job, Logan said. It doesn't feel like enough, Aaron said. It never does, Logan said. But it is. You don't measure it in the conversation. You measure it in whether he comes back next Saturday. Aaron was quiet. Did you know it would feel like this, Aaron said, when you started doing it? The visits, the letters. Did you know it would feel like it's too much and exactly right at the same time? Logan thought about it. No, he said. I didn't know it. I've learned it. How long does it take? Aaron said. Before you can hold it without it. He searched for the word. Before it doesn't knock you over. You don't stop being knocked over, Logan said. You just get better at standing up from it faster. He paused. And you stop being alone when it happens, which changes the weight of it. Aaron looked at him. You're not alone with it, Logan said. That's what this whole structure is. Not the certifications, not the partnership agreements, the fact that you're not standing in that lot by yourself processing what just happened. Aaron absorbed that. Darius is going to be okay, Logan said. I've been watching him too. He's got the same thing you have. He just needed someone to notice it in him. Yeah, Aaron said, then quieter. That's all it was, wasn't it? Someone noticing. That's all it ever is, Logan said. No, and it's everything, Ian. The interview request came on a Tuesday in November. Not the first interview requests, those had been arriving since the morning after the ceremony, and Denise had developed a refined system for processing them that involved 3 categories: decline, defer, and consider. The consider pile was thin. Logan had done 2 interviews in 8 months, both local, both focused specifically on the program and not on him personally, and both agreed to only after he had spoken with the outlet, confirmed the scope, and established in advance that the conversation would be about what the work was doing and not about 6 seconds in an alley. This request was from a national outlet. It was not the same category. Iron Bill brought it to Logan himself rather than routing it through Denise, which told Logan before Iron Bill said a word that Iron Bill thought it warranted a real conversation. They sat in the back office. Read it, Iron Bill said and handed him the email. It was from a producer at one of the major news programs, the kind that had been on the air for 40 years, and had a reputation for the kind of long-form journalism that took months to prepare. They were developing a piece on the program, specifically not on Logan or on the ceremony or on the alley, but on what the National Trades Network had built in the years since the article had changed its trajectory. They had already spoken with 3 of the distributed site operators, 2 school districts, and the email noted with a specificity that Logan registered immediately Curtis Webb. Curtis had told them to contact the foundation. Logan read the email twice. Curtis talked to them, Logan said. He did, Iron Bill said. Without telling us first, Iron Bill said. He called me yesterday. He said he'd been thinking about whether the program needed this kind of visibility, and he decided it did, and he gave them enough to be taken seriously, but not enough to be useful without our cooperation. Logan was quiet for a moment. That's a 67-year-old man who drove 8 hours, built a site from scratch, and then did the advance work for a national story without being asked, Logan said. That's what it is, Iron Bill said. He's embarrassed that he didn't ask first, Logan said. He is, Iron Bill said. He's also not wrong about the program needing this. Logan set the email down on the table. He thought about the 14 visits and the 41 handwritten letters and the 7 sites and the 112 apprentices now in the network across 4 states. He thought about the 2 correctional facility programs that operated in deliberate invisibility. He thought about Aaron and Darius and the 40 minutes in the lot. He thought about a 12-year-old girl looking up from her desk and deciding the fight was worth making. It would bring in more Curtis Webbs, Logan said. Significantly more, Iron Bill said. More sites, Logan said. More capacity, more everything, Iron Bill said, if it's handled correctly. Logan looked at him. What are the terms you'd want? Same terms you've always set, Iron Bill said. The story is the program. The program is the people in it, not you personally. They don't get the alley narrative again. They don't get the ceremony. They don't get the 6 seconds framing. He paused. They tell the story of what's been built and what it's doing for the people it's doing it for. Who do they talk to? Curtis already in. Ray, if he agrees, and he will, because I've talked to him, and he said, and I'm quoting exactly, tell them not to waste my time on anything that isn't about the work. Logan almost smiled. Aaron, Iron Bill said, if Aaron agrees. Logan looked at him. I didn't ask him, Iron Bill said. That's yours to ask. He's in your program. The decision of whether to put him in front of a national camera is yours and his together. Logan nodded. And you, Iron Bill said. Brief, Logan said. I'll talk about the program, about the model, about what we're trying to build and why. Nothing about, I know, Iron Bill said. Will they agree to that? They agreed to it in the email, Iron Bill said. In writing. The producer said, and I want you to hear this directly. He looked at the email. She said, we are not interested in making Logan Carter into a symbol. We are interested in whether what he helped build can be replicated. That is the story. The room was quiet. Logan thought about that for a long time. That's the right question, he said. That's what I thought, Iron Bill said. Tell them yes, Logan said. But he talked to Aaron that evening. Aaron was the last to leave the workshop, which had been his habit for months. Logan found him at the side table running over some notes from the day's session with Darius and two other apprentices who had recently moved up in the curriculum. Logan sat across from him and said it plainly the way he said everything that mattered. Aaron listened without interrupting, which was a quality he had developed over the past several months with the consistency of someone who had learned through practice that listening completely before responding was not patience but precision. When Logan finished, Aaron was quiet for a moment. Why me specifically, Aaron said. Because you came in with the highest guard of anyone in the program, Logan said, and you let it down by watching the work be real over time. That's the story of what the program is, not the technical skill that's the evidence. The actual story is that you came in expecting to be let down and you weren't. Aaron looked at his notes. I don't know how to talk to a camera, he said. You're not talking to a camera, Logan said. You're talking to the person asking the question. Same as you talked to Darius. Same as you talked to me in the bay that morning. He paused. Just say the true thing. What if the true thing sounds, Aaron stopped. Sounds what? Too small, Aaron said. Like they're going to want something big. Something that sounds like a turning point. And the actual thing is just, he struggled with it. It's just showing up. It's just that someone kept showing up until I stopped expecting them to stop. Logan looked at him. Aaron, he said, that is the big thing. Aaron was still. That is the entire thing, Logan said. Not the ceremony, not the video, not the article. The fact that someone kept showing up until you stopped expecting them to stop. That's what every single person in this program needed and didn't have before they got here. If you say exactly that to a camera, you will have told more truth in 30 seconds than most interviews manage in an hour. Aaron was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said. Yeah, Aaron said. I'll do it. He went back to his notes. Logan stood to leave. Logan, Aaron said. Logan turned. Darius came in early this morning, Aaron said. Before the session, just to be here. He paused. He didn't say anything about it. He just came early. Logan held that. That's it, Logan said. That's the measure. Aaron nodded. Logan went home. Ciao. The filming took 3 days. The producer was a woman named Ellen Marsh, 53 years old, with the specific quality of attention that characterized people who have spent decades in a profession that rewards the ability to hear what is underneath what is being said. She was not warm in the performative way of people who are trying to put their subjects at ease. She was warm in the more useful way of someone who is genuinely interested and lets that interest do the work. She talked to Curtis first. He arrived from Wichita with the same truck and the same directness and no apparent awareness that he was being filmed by a national outlet rather than talking to a neighbor over a fence. He talked about his shop. He talked about the 7 apprentices and what each of them was doing at this stage in the curriculum. He talked about his hands plainly without self-pity, describing what the loss of precision had taken and what the program had given back in its place. When Ellen asked him what the program had given back, Curtis was quiet for a moment in the way of a man locating the exact word for something he has been carrying for a while. Purpose, Curtis said. Not charity, purpose. There's a difference. Ellen said nothing. Charity is someone doing something for you, Curtis said. Purpose is someone giving you something to do that matters. This program does the second one. He paused. I drove 8 hours because someone finally asked correctly. Logan was not in the room for that exchange. Ray told him about it afterward without embellishment, with the specific brevity of a man reporting on something that had affected him and was not going to make a performance out of the fact. He said the right thing, Ray said. He usually does, Logan said. You knew that from the email, Ray said. I knew it from how he wrote about his hands, Logan said. A man who describes his own limitation with that kind of accuracy is a man who tells the truth. Ray looked at him. He had the expression he wore when Logan said something that matched a private conclusion he had reached independently. Get back to work, Ray said. Logan got back to work. Aaron's interview happened on the second day. Logan watched none of it while he was in the bay, which was where he was supposed to be, and Aaron did not need an audience. Denise came and found him afterward, not with a report, but simply with the information that it had gone well, which Denise delivered in the tone of someone who was understating something significantly. How well, Logan said. Ellen Marsh stopped the camera after 20 minutes and said she had what she needed, Denise said. She said she'd done over 300 interviews, and she could count on one hand the number of times a subject had said exactly the thing that made a piece complete in the first conversation. Logan said nothing. He told her about the showing up, Denise said, about expecting to be let down and not being. He said it exactly the way you told me he said it. She paused. She cried. She didn't stop the camera when she cried. She just let it run. Logan set down the wrench he was holding. He stood at the work table for a moment. He thought about Aaron at 22 with the guard that had taken months to come down, sitting across from a camera and saying the true thing without qualification or performance, and a 53-year-old producer crying and letting the camera run because she knew she was in the presence of something real. He went back to the frame he was building. He worked in silence for the rest of the afternoon. His interview was the third day last. Ellen Marsh sat across from him in the back office, Ray's table again, the right table, and she looked at him for a moment before she said anything in the way of someone taking a reading. You know what the others gave me, she said. No, Logan said. I wasn't there. Exactly enough of what the program is, she said. Curtis gave me the model. Ray gave me the craft. Aaron gave me the human truth of what changes when the model works. She paused. You're the only person who can tell me why. Not the origin story. I'm not interested in the alley. Why you built what you built. What you understood about what was missing. Logan thought about it. There are a lot of people in this country, he said, who have capacity that has no channel. Skill, intelligence, willingness, the fundamental stuff. And the system that's supposed to create channels for that capacity keeps failing the same people in the same ways. Not because the people lack something, because the channels aren't built for them. He paused. What we built isn't a charity. It's infrastructure. Different thing entirely. What's the difference? Ellen said. Charity gives people something, Logan said. Infrastructure gives people somewhere to put what they already have. He looked at her directly. Every person in this program came in with something. The program didn't create that something. It just stopped blocking it. Ellen was quiet. Curtis Webb drove 8 hours, Logan said, because someone asked him correctly, which means someone figured out that the question wasn't, can you donate? The question was, do you have something that's going unused that you'd like to put back into the world? Those are completely different questions. The second one is the one worth asking. Who taught you to ask it that way? Ellen said. Logan thought about it honestly. My mother, he said. Darnell, Iron Bill. He paused. Everyone who ever looked at me and saw something worth looking at before I'd given them much reason to. He paused again. You don't build the program you'd wish had existed. You build it because you know exactly what you needed and didn't have, and you decide that the having of it now is not the point. The passing of it forward is the point. Ellen wrote something. She had a notebook paper which Logan noticed and respected. When reporters ask you about the 6 seconds, she said, you always say the same thing. I've read the transcripts. Yeah, Logan said. Say it to me, she said. Not because I need it for the piece, because I want to hear it in this room. Logan looked at her. He said it the way he always said it, not as a quote, not as a prepared line, but as the simple statement of a thing he had worked out years before and which remained true regardless of how many times he said it. The real decision wasn't made that day, he said. It was made years earlier when I decided I would never stand still while someone else needed help. Ellen was quiet for a moment. And the program, she said, same decision. Same decision, Logan said. Larger scale. The piece aired 4 months later. Logan watched it with his mother and Iron Bill and Ray and Aaron in the back room of the workshop on a television that Ray had borrowed from someone, and which was slightly too small for the room, but which none of them commented on. Denise had brought food which she set on the side table, and which no one ate until the piece was over. It ran 41 minutes. Ellen had been given more time than she'd expected, which she told Logan afterward was the network's response to the rough cut they had watched it and decided it warranted more room. The piece opened with Curtis, not the alley, not the ceremony. Curtis in his shop in Wichita, hands on a piece of metal talking about purpose. Logan noted this with satisfaction. Ellen had understood the story. She had told it from the inside out, starting with the work and building outward to the why, which was the right direction for the kind of truth they were dealing with. Aaron's section came 20 minutes in. On the screen, Aaron looked like what he was, a 22-year-old man from a background that had not given him many reasons to trust that people meant what they said, sitting in a chair with the composed directness of someone who has decided that the true thing is the safest thing because it is the only thing he knows how to say reliably. He said what he'd said to Ellen, about showing up, about expecting to be let down, about the measure being whether someone was still there the next Saturday and the Saturday after that. In the back room of the workshop, nobody said anything. Aaron was sitting 2 chairs to Logan's left. Logan did not look at him during his section. He looked at the screen the way everyone else did because Aaron deserved to have the room watching the thing he'd made without the person who'd helped him make it watching him instead. When it was done, the full 41 minutes Logan's section last, which he watched with the focused discomfort of a man watching footage of himself and finding the experience deeply strange. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Ray said, "The table in the background of my section, I told them not to film that angle. There's a part I hadn't finished." Everyone laughed. It broke something open that had been building for 41 minutes, and the food got eaten. And Iron Bill poured something into the cups that Denise had set out, and the room filled with the particular quality of noise that comes from a group of people who have done something real together and are now sitting in the room that the real thing built. Patricia Carter, who had watched from her chair with her hands folded in her lap, caught Logan's eye across the room. She said nothing. She didn't need to. He had been able to read her face since he was 7 years old, and what was on it now was not pride in the theatrical sense, not the displayed emotion of a mother performing maternal feeling for an audience. It was simpler and more total than that. It was the expression of a woman who had been right about something for 24 years and who had tonight simply seen the proof of it. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he looked away because some things were private, even in rooms full of people who mattered, and what passed between him and his mother in that look belonged to the years that had led here and not to the room they were currently in. The network's inbox, which Ellen had told them to prepare for, received 11,000 messages in the first 48 hours after the piece aired. The Foundation's inbox received 4,000. Curtis Webb's phone, which was a landline, rang so many times over the following week that he eventually stopped answering it and sent a handwritten note to Denise asking if she could set up an email account for him and tell him how to use it, which Denise did, and which Curtis subsequently used with the same precision he used for everything, specific, efficient, and completely without the usual bewilderment of a 67-year-old man encountering email for the first time. 12 new distributed site applications arrived in the first month. 4 of them were operational within 6 months. Of the 4, 2 came from retired tradespeople who had seen Curtis's section specifically and called the Foundation with the particular energy of people who have been waiting for someone to ask the right question. Iron Bill built the intake structure fast because the inflection point was here, and inflection points didn't wait. He hired 2 additional staff, one for operations, one for site vetting, and he moved the legal framework for the National Trades Network from a subsidiary of the Foundation into its own entity, which gave it the structural independence to pursue partnerships that the Foundation model couldn't accommodate. Logan was named as the network's first director of programming. He accepted on the condition that he kept his bay. Ray told him that was not a condition he needed to negotiate because it had never been in question. And Logan said he knew that, but he wanted it in writing. And Ray said that was the most absurd thing he'd heard in 30 years of this work. And Logan said he'd take that as a compliment, and Ray said, take it however you want and get your angle right on the start pass. He kept the bay. He kept the start pass. He kept the notebook, a new one which filled at the same rate as the old one and for the same reasons, and which he kept in the same chest pocket. Aaron became the network's first apprentice instructor 9 months after the piece aired. The ceremony, such as it was, consisted of Ray handing him a set of keys to the workshop's main bay and saying, "Don't lose these, they're the only copies." And Aaron looking at the keys for a moment and then saying, "Should I? Is there something I'm supposed to say?" And Ray saying, "You're supposed to not lose the keys." And that being the entirety of it. Logan was there. He did not make a speech. He shook Aaron's hand, the same 3-second handshake that Iron Bill had used to seal the original agreement, and Aaron felt the weight of the reference and held it correctly, and that was the ceremony. Darius was in Aaron's first cohort. He had turned 16 by then, and he had been in the program for 7 months, and what the 7 months had done to him was visible in every dimension except the physical ones. The same height, the same face, but held differently, carried differently, inhabited by someone who had stopped bracing for impact and started actually living in it. Ray had told Logan privately, one of the strongest young hands he'd seen in years. Technically gifted in the specific way that couldn't be taught, the instinct for where the stress was, before the instrument confirmed it, the precision that came not from training, but from a natural attunement to material. He was the reason Logan had started to understand something he'd only partially understood before. The program was not about any individual story, not his, not Aaron's, not Curtis's. It was about the chain of it, the way each person who received something real became capable of passing something real forward, not as a transaction, but as a natural outgrowth of having been genuinely changed. Darius would be Aaron to someone else in 2 years or 5 years in circumstances none of them could currently predict. And that person would be Darius to someone else. And the chain would continue past anything that any of them would live to see, not because they had built a legacy, but because they had built a practice, and practice outlive their practitioners when they are built correctly. Iron Bill had understood this from the beginning. Logan had taken longer to understand it, and he had understood it not from Iron Bill's explanation, but from watching it happen, from seeing Aaron with the Darius and Darius arriving early, and the early arrival meaning more than any formal milestone, because it was freely chosen, completely unnecessary, and therefore completely true. On a Saturday evening in early spring, 14 months after Logan had first walked into the workshop and let Ray critique his start pass, he sat in the empty bay after everyone had gone. He had the notebook open. He was writing not because anything urgent needed recording, but because some days the work produced things worth keeping, and this had been one of them. Aaron had run the morning session without Logan present, which had been deliberate. The transition from assisted to independent required the assistant to actually leave, and Logan had spent the morning at the Foundation's office going through site vetting materials and trying not to think about whether the session was going well, which it had, because Aaron came to find him at noon with the particular expression of someone who has just discovered that they are capable of a thing they weren't entirely sure about. He had not said anything elaborate. He had said, "It went fine." And Logan had said, "I know." And Aaron had said, "You couldn't have known." And Logan had said, "I know because I know you." And Aaron had looked at him for a moment and then nodded and gone back to the workshop. That was the whole conversation. It was also everything. Reporters still asked Logan about the 6 seconds. They would probably always ask because the 6 seconds were the origin point of the public story, and origin points had a gravity that didn't diminish with time. He had developed a relationship with the question that was neither resistance nor performance. He answered it the same way every time, not because the answer was rehearsed, but because it was true. And true, things don't change with repetition. What changed was the context in which he gave the answer, and what the context revealed about the answer's meaning. At 24, standing at Darnell's bay door with 300 motorcycles parked on the street, the answer had been almost purely personal, a description of a private decision, a private practice, a private consistency that had happened to become visible. At 26, standing in rooms full of young people and retired craftsmen and veterans and program administrators and everyone else who had become part of what the 8 months and the 14 months and the ongoing accumulation had built. The answer meant something different. Not different in content. It was the same words, the same truth, but different in resonance. Because now it was not only about him. It was about every person in the program who had made the same kind of decision in their own context and their own scale. Every Aaron who had chosen the peer role, every Curtis who had driven 8 hours, every Darius who had arrived early, and sat in the workshop before the day began because it was the place where the practice was real and they wanted to be inside of it. The real decision wasn't made that day. It was made years earlier, when I decided I would never stand still while someone else needed help. Every person in the National Trades Network had made a version of that decision. Some of them had made it before they arrived. Some of them made it inside the program. Some of them were still working toward it, still in the space between who they had been and who they were becoming, still doing the daily practice of choosing the standard over the shortcut, the true thing over the easy thing, the showing up over the convenient absence. That was the work. Not 6 seconds, not one alley in Phoenix on one Tuesday evening, not a ceremony or an article or a 41-minute piece on national television. The work was the daily accumulation of small, correct decisions made by ordinary people who had decided that ordinary was not a limitation, but a practice, the practice of consistency, of integrity in the unseen moments of being the same person when someone was watching and when no one was. Logan Carter had not become something he wasn't when the world looked at him. He had simply been seen for the first time as what he had always been, and then he had spent every day since making sure that what he was built, something worth the seeing. That was the whole story. That was all of it, and it was nowhere near finished.